Welcome, everybody. How is everybody doing this Tuesday evening? Good to see everyone. So many amazing people in the chat already. Sorry about the little delay right there. I had to take care of the dogs real quick because they were borking up a storm and they needed my attention. And wow, I hope everybody's doing all right. So here we are. We're starting. We had so many things going on out there. I know currently right now Team Skeptic is live, and I don't normally do live streams on Tuesday night. There's a story behind this, and I will fill you all in on that. But I appreciate all of you being here, and thank you all so much. Let us see who before we dive into everything, because it's crazy. It's nuts. It's not what's going on in the Supreme Court, not what's going on in the States right now. It's what's going on with my content, and there's a little bit of a story behind this next video, so I'll get into that. But let's see who is in the live chat before we get started. So, Hello Baby commented first. Appreciate you being here, Hello Baby. Thank you very much. And I read the... let me see here. What is it? Let me just go down this real quick. So, Hello Baby commented first. It says, just because religious institutions have written a control book and monetized, weaponized God does not mean that every human on every continent since the beginning of time knew that there was something spiritual, something bigger than us or benevolent, that feeling of being watched in the woods, translated spiritually. We're wrong. I have been a Christian minister since I was 25 years old and reject all major weaponized religious control and zealous fools of the unloving God, but I debate you in an effing heartbeat. Me and the dude so tight. Anything I ask for is given to me. It takes about 2 weeks, 2 seconds, depending. Faith can't be you realize that there's a problem with that. If you pray for something and it takes like 2 seconds to get it or 2 weeks to get it, because you realize the error in that, right? Because it's just hindsight bias. Because if it eventually comes true, then that confirms what you already believe is going to happen. If it never comes true, then it also confirms what you already believe. So there's a problem in that reasoning. But faith can't be quantified or argued. It is or it is not. Faith can be quantified. It's an emotional appeal is what it is. So try to read about. I've read Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. Anything written by Carolyn Miss. Revelations by Richard Bach. Conversations with God. Conversations with God is already... It's already been heavily disputed and criticized as a combination of literally a bunch of combinations. It's kind of like this neo amalgamation of the best parts of Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. He took the best parts from like all the prevailing religions and then molded them into one thing with a little bit of woo mixed in. So that's already been knocked down. It's nothing new is in Conversations with God. It's just this kind of like this almost like neo pantheistic ideology that is all like woo and loving and that kind of stuff. It eschews the darker aspects of Christianity of all the faiths for all of the happy aspects. And you mentioned Deepak Chopra in there, who is just full of crap. So I'm sorry to say that Deepak Chopra is just full of crap. I appreciate you, Hello Baby, for being a sub. I do. It says, I think you are extremely intelligent, compassionate human being. I appreciate that very, very much. And I understand your position. I get what you're trying to say here. Unfortunately, it's, you get the whole point of the channel. The whole point of what I do here is pointing out irrational beliefs and the irrational behaviors that follow. It's how I kick off every one of my videos. It's the point of what I'm doing here, because it is irrational beliefs leading to irrational behaviors that cause the societal divides that will eventually destroy what we have built. Societal divide is one of the worst things about this. And it's not even always just religion. Societal divide on what is truth, societal divide on what is evidence, societal divide on where we're going as a species, what should be our focus, what is morality. Our inability to find a common ground amongst so many different topics just because we want to hold on to preconceived notions or things that make us feel good because we put emotions ahead of evidence and ahead of rationality, that is problematic. Your emotions are valid, but in determining what the truth is, your emotions are not valid. And people can't, vast majority of people out there can't seem to get their heads around this. That's the whole point. Is like, yes, I feel certain ways about certain things, but that doesn't mean what I feel reflects reality in and of itself. I love dogs more than I love cats. It doesn't mean that dogs are objectively better than cats. They're both animals, and they both have pros and cons to keeping them, and they both have their places in the ecosystem, in the food web, and however you want to put it, or in the biosphere. But nonetheless, I just prefer them. It doesn't make them better, So you have to be able to set your emotions aside and say, okay, I feel this, but I have to acknowledge this. And then what I feel does not override the reality. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Hello, baby. Sean Alexander's in the house. Says, greetings, my fellow heathens, heretics, and hooligans. Greetings, Sean Alexander, a member of the Godless Army. Appreciate you being here, bud. Robert Caslow as well says, what up, my globe-tarded heretics? May Cthulhu give you love and affection. Cthulhu Vatog and my good friend. Thank you so much, Robert Caslow. Donnie Does That's in the house. Says, hey, everybody, a member of the Godless Army. Thank you, Donnie Does That. Appreciate it. Dr. Nimrod as well says, hello, everybody, and the obligatory bacon. Thank you so much. Also a member of the Godless Army. Thank you, Dr. Nimrod. Charlie Welch is here. Says, I choose this. I've had it with chili. Hey, JL. Hey, Charlie Welch. The only man on the internet you never make a bet with. Good to see you, Charlie Welch, member of the Godless Army. And yeah, I understand that chili's getting a little bit old, especially since the recent events have come out that pretty much expose what he is. We all know he's a grifter. His actions have demonstrated that he is. He's pretty much shot himself in the foot, and he's pretty much done. I actually invited him to come on my channel to talk about some things, and he was just too busy. He couldn't be bothered. So, because I wanted to ask him some serious questions about what he's doing and the societal effects of what he's doing, and how, what he's doing is counterproductive to his message. And he didn't take me up on it, which is a shame. But appreciate you being here, Charlie Welch. I Heart Dogs, good to see you. I Heart Dogs as well. Member of the Godless Army, thank you so much. Tony Regime is in the house. Good to see you, Tony Regime. Thank you so much for being here as well. And I see... Boom, 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 boom. Oh, let me just jump. Oh, damn, I hate it when it jumps on me, because then I gotta scroll back. Oh, Tony Regime. I hope I handle the dogs as you. No, I just needed to get them. I needed to get them COOKIE. In order to calm them down. And thank you, Dr. Nimrod. Yes, I found that you get those rare opportunities where you get a picture of the dogs, and it's just absolutely adorable. And I had to post that up. I was like, because the two of them sleeping together, or snoozing together is just fantastic. I love it when they get along, because Torque and Oso. Oso's the German Shepherd. Torque is the Black-mouthed cur. The two of them are like young brothers. And because they're Oso is just is only a few months younger than Torque. And the two of them scrap like brothers. It's hilarious. Now, they have each other's backs like brothers as well, but they also throw down like brothers, and it's hilarious to watch, but also incredibly destructive. The coffee table, what's on the coffee table, we have to be very, very careful. But because Oso's still not kind of in control of his size. He still kind of like floppy runs because he's so young. But yeah, the two of them are great. And every once in a while we catch these cute little moments of them snoozing together or snuggling, and I wanted to capture a picture of it. So thank you, Dr. Nimrod. I appreciate that. Let me see who else is. Robert Cass says, how many chimpanzees does it take to change a light bulb? I don't know, but I hope you give me an answer, because I'm sure it will be hilarious. Gavlar, Hand of Zod, is in the house. Good to see you, Gavlar, member of the Godless Army. Thank you so much. Says, good evening, everyone. Good to see you, Gavlar. Thank you so much for being here. All right, Charlie Watch says, doobie-doobie-doo. I remember those penguins. Beware of them. H. Jasper E is in the house. Says, hi, awesome, everybody. It's good to see H. Jasper E, member of the Godless Army. Thank you so much for being here. The Indestructible Trifold himself is here. Good to see you, Indestructible Trifold. Hello. Hope your day is going well. Good to see you. Chris S. is in the house. Says, just lurking, studying for OChem. Oof, OChem is rough. But I wish you all the best on whatever upcoming exams that you have, because OChem, once you get through it, it's kind of like calculus. Calculus was just calculus was rough. Calculus was rougher than trig, but calculus is just like, oh, come on. But nonetheless, you eventually get through it and you're like, good, I'm done. I Heart Dogs is better now that it's stream time. Yes, it is better. Hey, Aaron Reese is in the house. Says, hello, fellow faithless fuckers and all others. Yes, thank you, Aaron Reese. Thank you so much for being here. Caliban as well says, hi, JL. Good to see you, Caliban. Boomer, neat. Good to see you, Boomer. Thank you so much for being here, bud. Member of the Godless Army. Thank you so much for the support, amigo. I do appreciate it. Just Call Me Avi's in the house. Says, poof, I appear. I see you. Thank you so much for being here. Just Call Me Avi. Thank you. Appreciate it. Robert Cazzo says, did you summon Yog-Sothoth for help? That's what a professional does. Only when necessary. He's a very busy entity. So, very busy old god. Can't disturb him just for anything. That's how you get Dunwich horrors and stuff like that. Peter Noddles in the house says, good day, mate. Good to see you, Peter Noddle. Thank you so much for being here. KCA Randy sounds wishful. Good to see you, KCA Randy. Thank you so much for being here. Same with Angel Rivera. Appreciate you being here. Says, what up, Bridge the Divide. Good to see you, Angel Rivera. Oh, let me see. HS3 says, looking forward to being surprised, if at all, of what awaits, but I don't hold my breath. I'll go into the story here in just one moment, as soon as I waste a whole bunch of time saying hi to everybody. You know, Logical Hillbilly's in the house. Good to see you, Logical Hillbilly. Member of the Godless Army, I do appreciate it. Says, hello, good people. Yes, Sean Alexander's pretty much MAGA. You know, extremely irrational. Deeply irrational. Casey Randy says, cats suck. It's their independent. Actually, no, it's the snark that they look at you. You know, like the fact, you know, that they act like they're gods. Oh, Aaron Reese says, my cat's way better than your dog's. I doubt that. I'm going to roll the dice and say I doubt that. I doubt that highly. Dr. Nerman says, JL, do you have any irrational beliefs at all? Mine is my utter love for my cat, and then I believe she loves me too. Irrational beliefs? Yeah, I would have some emotionally bounces, even though I know that it's completely irrational, and I acknowledge its irrationality. I would save my dogs over, like, if there was a fire and my dogs were in the building with another person, I would save my dogs first. I would go after my dogs. That's just, it's wholly irrational and is not even logical. But, you know, my emotional decisions. But I recognize its irrationality. You know, that's simply what it is. If I can, I just want to be intellectually honest about it. Let me see. Robert Castle says, Aaron said, why he did the videos on disproving the flood, the number of believers that claptrap in Texas is scary as... Oh, Aaron said, why he did the videos on disproving the flood, the number of believers that claptrap in Texas is scary. Yes, it is scary how many believers of them there are. It's crazy. It really is crazy. Let me see. Boomer says calculism can shoot itself. Absolutely it can. It absolutely can shoot itself. John Rapp, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Says, don't you dare debunk my smartacy or handsomenessy fallacies. McKinnon Mitchell popped in. It's like, good to see you. McKinnon Mitchell said, if you're still live after a while, I'll hop back in. We're going to be here a minute. We are going to be here a moment because I got stuff I want to go over, and I'm going to explain it here in a sec. Clive Wells, thank you so much for being here with the obligatory ghost. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. XD1 is here. It says, Dr. Nimrod, that's not irrational. Pets also display affection for their owners. They do. They do. Let me see. What am I never going to live down? Oh, let me see. Chili is a constipational scholar. Oh, just call me who says, JL believes in ghosts, mystic energies, some forms of woo. I don't. I'm never going to live it down. I will never live it down. But just for those who are not aware, I will explain it this one time. I said what I was trying to convey, and my official position is, until new evidence comes in, is that what humans are identifying as ghosts may, in fact, be a natural phenomena that we don't fully understand. That's all it is. It could be pareidolia, it could be apophenia, which we do readily understand, but it could be a natural phenomena that we don't fully understand. Just like there are animals out there, or there are some extremely rare weather phenomena that we don't fully understand because they happen so rarely, or they're so difficult to study that we don't know a lot about them. So it could be that. Kind of like ball lightning, you know? We kind of understand ball lightning. We kind of do, but not really, because we can create it in the lab, but how it occurs we can create such effects in the laboratory, but how it just randomly happens in reality it's difficult, because it's difficult to study it in the natural environment. So it's kind of like that. I attribute it to possibly natural phenomena that is just understudied or like a limited amount of information. That's it. And then people are misidentifying it as ghosts, or what they're calling it, or some sort of supernatural experience, kind of like angels or demons or aliens or whatever. So that's it. That's all I was trying to convey. But I do appreciate the alternative energy emojis. I really, really do. Oh, Ghost Please call me Ghost Believer. Yes, Mystique Tony Jones, PhD Tony fucking can. He absolutely can. Cal Cool J, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it. There's a miracle happened today. I broke an egg and there was 2 yolks. You twinsies. Awesome. Doesn't happen often, but does happen. I do not believe in necromancy. Just call me Avi. I do not. And let me see. Fred Knotts in the house. Good to see you, Fred Knotts. Says, who dis, new phone. Good to see you, Fred Knotts. Thanks so much for being here. And I think I got... Oh, nope. Ida Pimp Yuta Hose in house says, I will have to tell you about my experience at Bridge the Divide. I'd love to hear it sometime. I really, really would. Mr. Malort's in the house, member of the Godless Army. Thank you so much. Sorry I got caught up on team. Not a problem. Totally get it. We normally don't go live at the same times, but this was a big one, and I'll get to the story in just a moment. Aaron Reese says, ball lightning was what Irish and Skeptic did to you with that taser. That I'm telling you, the taser does nothing. That thing was not shocking. It was not. It was like static electricity. That's what it felt like. It felt like static electricity. I don't know. But, Demon and Team said it both hurt. I'm telling you it doesn't. And I put it in multiple places. Areas that should have been sensitive. But, it didn't work. Nano, Flying Man Disciples in the house. Good to see you, Nano. Demons and Angels are such a later concept of the Bible. True. Clive Wells says, JL believes ghosts are real and explained by quantum mechanics. Oh, such a misrepresentation of my position. But I appreciate it, Clive Wells. Thank you so much. Sean Alexander says, necromancy does exist. How do you think I get out of bed in the morning? There are some days, I'm getting up there, some days I would agree with you. I actually would. It does kind of feel that. Caliban says, bleed through from an alternate universe. Yeah. You never know. You never know. Just Call Me Avi says, I like magic, mystical energies, and alchemy too. Your secret is safe with me. I'll be right back. I gotta go charge my crystals in the moonlight. But nonetheless, let's see what we got. Okay, so normally on Tuesdays, I have actually, you know what? Oh, but before we get into this, I came across, I found, or let's see, I was watching a video that clued me into another video. And I wanted to kick this off, and I may try to make this a part of like regular live stream stuff, but I wanted to give you all some of the greatest irony. First thing we're gonna do is I want to give you all the greatest irony I've seen in a long time. So as a lot of you know, if you pay attention to the news, I know the news is so just god awful these days that a lot of people don't want to hear what's going on just because it's just trash. The destruction of, the erosion of the separation between church and state, the erosion of our protected rights, and power being exerted over women is just absolutely ridiculous. And this whole like prayers in school now that coaches can lead students in prayer, and it's looking ugly. But a lot of you may know that the West is currently under an extreme drought, that the Colorado River is perilously low, I've seen pictures of it. It looks really, really bad, and that people are running out of water, namely Utah, California, Arizona, and Nevada. And so pretty much anywhere that draws from the Colorado River. And I think it was Lake Mead is also extremely low. So running out of water is really, really bad. So I found this to be interesting because I was introduced to this video, which I think you'll enjoy. It's a very, very short one. We're going to take a look at it here real quick. That is the greatest irony I've ever, I think probably up there in the top 3 of ironic videos I've ever heard. I give you, and it's kind of an old video. You may have seen it, you may not have, but I give you the governor of Utah addressing the drought.
We need more rain, and we need it now. We need some divine intervention. That's why I'm asking Utahns of all faiths to join me in a weekend of prayer, June 4th through the 6th. By praying collaboratively and collectively, asking God or whatever higher power you believe in for more rain, we may be able to escape the deadliest aspects of the continuing drought.
So that was the governor of Utah asking Utahns to collectively pray no matter what they believe, to pray to their gods. Literally, the Mormons don't care what you believe, just pray to your God collectively to try and bring the rain. And the Mormons, who think that all other religions are false and all other religions are wrong, it doesn't matter that they think that your religions are wrong, that your God, that you worship false deities. But he wants everybody to pray together to bring the rain. Charlie Welch says, "Joke's on him. I prayed for drought." It was absolutely, I found that to be absolutely hilarious. That when the going gets tough, and I'm talking when the going gets real tough, they'll try anything, even appealing to gods that they don't believe in, or appealing to the people who believe in gods that they don't believe in. I just find that absolutely ridiculous. Instead of just accepting the fact that what is God's will. So if there's a drought, then God willed the drought. So you're suffering from this because God willed the drought. And for you to pray for him to change his mind or to send rain is extremely arrogant because you would be going against God's will. Deal with it. You know? It is absolutely, I found that to be absolutely hilarious, and I wanted to share that with all of you. Turing Test 2's in the house. Good to see you. It says, damn, just dropped in to see that clip. Thoughts and prayers, people. Thoughts and prayers. That's right. Sending them by the truckloads, and those trucks are mighty light at the checkpoints. Turing Test 2, a member of the Godless Army, thanks so much for the support. Appreciate it. Dr. Nimmer says, dear God, please piss on us. We want your divine golden showers. Ah. This as long as it takes place in a Russian hotel room. I kid. H.S. Bree says, that vague. Even Thunderfoot won't debunk. Triggered Limey's in the house says, hello, you beautiful bastards. Hello, you beautiful bastard. Good to see you, Triggered Limey. Thank you so much for being here, bud. Sean Alex says, pray for rain. It's the least you can do. That's right. It appears that Troubled Limey's having some trouble sleeping. That's right, Charlie Welch. Because I think it's like midnight over there. Or it's almost 1 in the morning over there. I think it's like 1 a.m. Almost. But yeah, it's really hilarious. Appealing to everybody who believes in gods that they believe are false in order to bring the rain. I guess they shouldn't have been tapping that groundwater. Nonetheless, Clive Wells says, did the governor also sacrifice a goat to end the drought? If not, he wasn't serious. Good point. Excellent point there. Marcus Dresden's in the house. Good to see you, Marcus Dresden. Thank you so much for being here. Aaron Reese says, Sunday, for one time only at the Salt Lake City Sports Arena, God vs. God in Battle for the Ages. You know, you think that would have been a clue? Salt Lake. It's a lake of salt. You think that would have been a clue? It's like, huh. Robert Gass says, do the Foghorn Leghorn rain dance. Egbert showed how good that worked. This is true. So, the story as to my created content. So normally I drop new content on Tuesdays. And I was working on a video. I'd been working on a video. And I've been working on this video for a little over a week. And I can honestly say, as you see the picture, if you saw the picture in the thumbnail, it's 10 proofs for God. And the person who did the video, his name is Greg Sarita. And his channel is Bible Flockbox. Greg Sarita he kicked off the channel in 2014, and he immediately, with a hard, dive face first into the stupid pool with, extreme alt-right fundamentalist conspiratorial nonsense. He demonizes Catholics, Jews, Muslims, Democrats, and then espouses warnings about, the rise of the New World Order, and pushes hard anti-LGBTQ propaganda, plays I Spy with the Illuminati, and, does a bunch of videos trying to justify his ridiculously fringe hermeneutic. The guy is just, and he often creates videos. Creates videos where he uses the victims of tragedies to prop up as props. He uses the victims of tragedies as props to push his narrative. The guy is like straight trash, ravings about the apocalypse and the Antichrist and all kinds of stuff. He's a hardcore alt-right fundamentalist evangelical Christian with his own testimony, which is just rife with confirmation bias and hindsight bias. Type 1, type 2 errors. So it's all over the place. So I came across him once before, and when I saw his rhetoric, I was like, I don't want to platform this dude. I really don't want to talk about him. Some of the more extreme guys, other than the IFB, because the IFB is a cult, and that cult needs to, because cults can gain power, and that cult needs to be addressed. So I'll address the cult, but when I addressed the new IFB, when I talked about Mejia in Los Angeles, or in Orange County, when I talked about Bruce Mejia, that video, there was one of my videos that was knocked down, that was yellow carded by YouTube, and that was because of the stuff that was in it. Nothing that I did, because I didn't curse once and I didn't say anything hateful. It was because of the person I was covering. And he didn't even cuss. It was just the topics at hand. It was wwild. So I wanted to be really, really careful when addressing, the new IFB. So that's people like Pastor, Greg? Was it? No, it was, goddamn. Some of their names, I can't recall the names off the top of my head. But anyway, so this guy, Greg Sarita, did this video, which is 10 proofs for God. And I was going to do a created content, and then it was going on, but the video was like 20 minutes long. So I was thinking, the more I got into it, I was thinking maybe I could just split this into the first 5 and the second 5. And the reason I found this video is because Sir Sick covered it. And if you haven't checked out Sir Sick's channel, it's hilarious. He does fantastic work. He covered the video, but he only covered the first one because, to try and cover everything, the video would be forever. That's why I figured I could do it in 2 parts. I'll do the first 5 and then I'll do the second 5. But then the more I got into it and the more I listened to him talk and the more it got worse and worse and worse. It was fallacy upon fallacy. It was logical fallacy upon logical fallacy, informal fallacies, formal fallacies. It was just bad, and it got worse and worse. And every time I'd go back and listen to make sure, because I always go back and double check my work to make sure that I got the context of everything correct so I can address it correctly. And I spent so much time just writing the damn script. Like 4 days I spent on this damn script to try and get this thing done and decide where I want to be funny, where I want to put it. It became such a headache that I figured, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to do a live debunk. Sir Sick only got through the very first of it, only addressed his first one, his first proof of God. And needless to say, it's not, but but I want to dive into it because it is really, really bad. And I want to do this live for 2 reasons. 1, because I love being live with you guys. I love hanging out with y'all. And 2, is because this is an example of the type of reasoning that is out there. Now, yes, it's extreme, and yes, it is not an example of all Christianity. But then again, Christians cannot turn around and say that this guy does not represent Christianity, because he does. To say that he doesn't is just the no true Scotsman fallacy. So he pulls from the Bible, he cites it religiously, for lack of a better term, and this isn't real. Jail doesn't take a piss without a script. I like to be prepared. I do. I like to be prepared. Yes, Sir Sick and Logic are terrific. They're both fantastic. So, but this is, obviously, we're all aware of the, essentially begging the question concerning the existence of God, begging the question concerning the truth of the Bible. How do you determine these things without resorting to circular reasoning? We're all aware of that. But this gets really, really bad. And I think I got to number 3 after almost a week of writing this damn thing. And it was just... you'll see here in a sec. So instead of doing created content, I want to do a live debunk. So this is, and I wish I'd had like PhD Tony on here with me or a plot hole, but you never know, they may pop by. So, but let's take a look at this. This is Greg Sarita from the channel Bible Flock Box, and his 10 proofs for God. There might be some sections there that I jump because
God exists, or is he just an imaginary sky fairy that religious people like to believe in because it helps them cope in life?
Well, then just going from the start. What was it? Just called me as jail has bad road rage when listening to this crap while driving. True or false? I don't listen to this crap while driving. I don't, because when I listen to it, I start paying attention to it, and I need to pay attention to the road. So I don't listen. I listen to music while I'm driving. So, Indestructible Fred says, "Dag nabbit JL, why don't you love me? I do love you. I love everybody. I love all of y'all very, very much." Robert Caslow, Bible Fuckbox. Yes, I am 7. Brilliant. So, wait, vote 2. What's the voting for? Yes, look at the trees. Let me see. I don't know what the vote's for. So anyway, yeah. Oh, number 2. Yes, it's the second one. The evidence concludes that the second one is more rational. The first one is not. So
God definitely exists.
No, it does not. The Christian God in of itself is defined as is definitionally a logical contradiction. This has been explained dozens of times. I've walked dozens of theists through this argument, and how in an attempt to basically humans attempted, and when they were trying to explain phenomena that they didn't understand, natural phenomena they didn't understand in our most primitive years. When humans were trying to think up the most powerful thing they could, they inadvertently created a paradoxical entity. And so saying that this thing possesses all true knowledge, or basically is omniscient, in possession of all true propositions, and omnipotent, capable of any action that is logically consistent. Omnibenevolent or omnipresent, because omniscience and omnipresence kind of negates free will, but we supposedly have free will, but that's a negation there. That's a logical contradiction. The problem of evil is a logical contradiction the logical problem of evil is a contradiction when it comes to omnibenevolence. And then, of course, omnipotence and omniscience, because an omnipotent God cannot perform an action that is outside of its infallible foreknowledge. So these are the logical contradictions that exist between these things. They defined it into non-existence because they needed something more powerful than just sufficiently powerful. And then all the things you hear nowadays about God being metaphysically necessary, or the metaphysical ontology of all truth, these things are new arguments. These are new arguments that were created because God, the concept, had been pushed so close to the edge of the board. It was, in some cases, had been pushed completely off the board of understanding. So they needed new arguments that took God, that essentially, this is where that God went from an entity that walks the earth and talks with people and loves us all and interacts with us, to a metaphysically necessary mind that exists outside of time and space. That's where God has been pushed to. It has been pushed to a realm that is definitionally non-existent, because there is no outside time and space, or outside space-time. So our understanding of reality has pushed it to the realm of non-existence, or I would say to a realm that qualifies as non-existence. Meets the same qualifications. Hey, Jefferson Spatchcock, legendary Jefferson Spatchcock's in the house. Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Aaron Reese says God is all-knowing and he fucking hates us. This is true. So, no, the Christian God, so while the deistic, like the deity, your standard, what I like to say, your sufficiently powerful enough entity that kicked the football in the universe and then fucked off with no evidence of its existence, that's unfalsifiable. But the Christian God, as defined in the Bible, if you just take the Bible, the source, the breathed word of this entity, it defines itself out of existence. All of this new crap is not derived from the Bible. This is all stuff that was thought up to try and keep God on the board. That's all it is. All the philosophical mumbo jumbo, the philosopho crap that's drummed up, because the older I get and the more I study this, the more I'm really starting to dislike the philosophy that goes behind these things, because it is wholly intellectually dishonest. But nonetheless, I digress. Let's continue on with this. Oh, Aaron says, jail is front. I don't even have a spanner. Very discriminating. I apologize. I'll have to get that to you. Because remember, I'm on StreamYard. So I have to be on YouTube to do that. But I will get you. Yes, spanner for Reese. Hashtag spanner for Reese. I will get that to you.
And I don't want you to just take my word for it.
We won't.
Instead, in this video, I'm going to present to you 10 undeniable facts that prove God is real.
So this is where this dude looks like an older butthead. That's hilarious, Angel Rivera. Oh, that's hilarious. So here's what's problematic, is that he says undeniable facts. So, and I won't lie, there's a lot of wordplay in this. The power of language is heavily abused when talking about when creationists and intelligent designers try to make their arguments. They abuse language, and they abuse the power of language, and this nothing new to a lot of us. So when he's talking about undeniable facts, facts being that which represent reality. Okay, facts that which. Oh, sorry, Irish Demon just sent me a message. No, he said he sent a message to another thing. So undeniable facts about reality. So that means that these facts that he's going to present are as undeniable as the phenomena we call gravity, as undeniable as redshift, blue shift, as undeniable as the theory of evolution. Okay, that's what he's talking about. That's what he's presenting these as. I guarantee, but you'll see. Hey, John Fapiano's in the house. Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Action Squad as well. Thank you so much for being here as well. And yes, Action Squad, his cadence is uncomfortable. And that's because as I was going through this over and over and over again, he's reading from a script. And you can see his eyes tracking what he's reading. And that's why his cadence is off, because apparently he's not very good with it. Because that's why he's like, because he'll get to the end of a line and you can see where the line, you can actually tell where the line breaks are by the way he speaks. So, Dr. Nick from the hi everybody. It's absolutely true. But
before I do that, make sure and subscribe.
No, we don't need to do that. Let's just jump ahead. All right, so
God, if there is a God.
Let's jump to this.
Fact number 1. Bible prophecy proves the existence of God.
So the problem with this statement, and we're going to do this, because this is why this video was so damn problematic, is because of the way he's stating things. And I'm going to break this down because trying to do this in a creative video would have been a fucking nightmare. And hopefully it'll alleviate the cadence problems of the way he speaks. Bible prophecy proves God's existence. It's a blanket statement that covers all the prophecies in the Bible. Okay? All the prophecies in the Bible. Hey, Surf, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here, as well as Jinju. Thank you so much for being here as well. I appreciate it. So, his blanket statement, Bible prophecy proves God's existence, essentially covers all of the prophecies of the Bible, which we know are not true. Like, for one example, the city of Tyre was never destroyed. So, that's not something that ever occurred. So, that prophecy never came true. And to say that it would come true now, I mean, given the amount of time, yeah, that's not a prophecy that ever came true. So there's a number of prophecies that never came true or are so utterly vague that any random set of occurrences in the future could be interpreted as that prophecy coming true, which is post-diction fallacy. So, but here we go. So he doesn't address obviously he doesn't address all the prophecies, but he does address one. And it's deeply problematic, and you'll see why here in just a moment. Oh, let me see here. Oh, tell people who... Stroke Assaulter's in the house. Good to see you, Stroke Assaulter. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it. Fix your teleprompter scroll speed, sir.
If there is a God, and he is omniscient as the Bible claims he is...
The operative word being if.
Then he would know the future.
Technically, yeah, he would know a future. So God wouldn't have to prophesize about anything. He'd be making statements, objective statements about reality, because he knows it. He knows all true propositions. So he's just stating what reality is from God's perspective. To us, it may seem, because we have no knowledge of the future. To us, it may be prophetic, but from God, it's not prophetic. So if the Bible is the breathed word of God, then these are just statements about reality. But then the question becomes, if they're statements about reality, why are they so vague? Why can't God just say flat out, this is what's going to happen at this day and time? Done. But it doesn't happen that way. The problem is, we get those vagaries when humans are making predictions about reality. And the reason we do that is because when you predict something like date, time, when you try to be really specific in a prophecy, they turn out to be false. Because it's all woo. It's nonsense. But no, I digress.
The Lord even said in Isaiah chapter 42 verse 9, "Behold, the former things are come to pass, and new things do I declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them."
Yeah, that's just, that's just God tells you about the future.
Since God said he can predict the future,
God's not predicting the future. He's telling you what the future is, because God doesn't have to make predictions.
Then we can expect to find prophecies about the future in the Bible.
We do find prophecies, and none of them, they don't come true. So.
And indeed we do. For example, in the book of Daniel chapter 2, we are given an outline of the rise and fall of world-ruling empires even to modern times.
So no, we don't, and we're gonna go through as to why. But the rise and fall of empires is just an observation about reality. There were empires that rose and fell before Babylon. If anybody's not familiar with the Book of Daniel, the Book of Daniel details Daniel was supposedly a prophet and was written as a prophet as part of that story, and he lived his entire life in Babylon. He lived there through the I can't remember the name of the king that he was under, but then when Babylon was conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, when Nebuchadnezzar came in and took Babylon, then he lived there. Then he lived under Nebuchadnezzar's rule, and he was one of the wise people to Nebuchadnezzar. And then when Cyrus came in and took it from him, he was under Cyrus for a while. And so he lived his entire life in Babylon, and he made predictions and did things for the kings, And the stories are all about how Daniel convinced, essentially like pagan kings to believe in his God. And the big first one was Nebuchadnezzar, who had a dream, and Daniel, and he went to Daniel to talk to him about it.
Traditional scholarship maintains that the book of Daniel was written in the 6th century BC.
No. First and foremost, what he means by traditional scholarship, he means biblical scholarship. Meaning the scholarship that is intentionally trying to prove the Bible, which means that it already has that bias baked in. Historical scholarship, the scholarship that actually traces the linguistic patterns, it traces the actual writing of the book, and how we legitimately do this with all other texts. The Bible, how we did it with the Quran and other books as well. It has the book written about the 2nd century, specifically 165, if I do remember correctly. Because I still have my notes here. 165 BCE is when the book of Daniel was written, roughly 373 years after Daniel's purported death. So that's when the book was written. So the book is written in the 2nd century and has a 6th century setting. So no, that's why he said traditional scholarship. That's biblical scholarship. The scholars that are trying to prove the Bible correct. So no, it was written in the 2nd century, almost 400 years after Daniel's death, which already presents a problem for all of the prophecies within it, because 400 years after the events of Daniel, after the events of his life, this would already be known. So this is either they're writing down what they knew and claiming it to be prophecy, or it's just they're matching events to meet the events that occurred, which is just post-diction.
Yet it predicts events far ahead of that time. In Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a statue made of 4 metals. It had a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, a belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet, part of iron and part of clay.
So yeah, Nebuchadnezzar had this dream. He didn't know what the dream meant, and Daniel was considered one of the wise people. Was amongst the wise people that were that kind of consulted, or basically that consulted with the king, and that consulted Nebuchadnezzar. He wanted to know what the hell this dream meant. So Daniel shows up. So he calls for them all to discuss the dream with them.
The prophet Daniel gave the interpretation of the king's dream.
Interpretation of the king's dream. This is not a prophecy. This is Daniel interpreting the dream that Nebuchadnezzar supposedly had. So it's not even a prophecy. He's interpreting the dream as a prophecy. So no, this is not a legitimate prophecy. Nebuchadnezzar brought the dream to him, and he made some shit up to explain what he saw in the dream. This is not a prophecy.
He said in verses 37 through 39, "You, O king, are a king of kings."
He would say this because Nebuchadnezzar was the king. Because in Babylon only had one king. All power. The king had absolute power. So there was one king, and Nebuchadnezzar was it. So he is the king of Babylon, and he's just making the claim that for God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory, wherever. That's it. That's it. You're king because God made you king. That's a claim that obviously cannot be backed up.
For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold.
So this was a big thing, and this is what I ran into, and I struggled whether or not I wanted to include a breakdown of what's going on here. Let's just hypothetically presume that Daniel existed, and this event that's being depicted in this, because it's pretty much understood that this was a story that was shared in the oral tradition, that this was just a story of events, or a story that didn't actually take place. That this is just one of the fables that was passed along oral tradition and then finally written down as the book of Daniel. So what we see here, what Daniel is doing here, is not interpreting any. Oh, he interpreted like the gold there. Jefferson says a little bit of pushback. Biblical scholarship is the study of the books of the Bible and is an effort of historians. I agree with you, and Jefferson Sebastian says theology is the attempt to attach broad themes and interconnect narratives to those books. True. From what I've gathered, and I have not gathered everything, I have seen that there is a concerted bias in biblical scholarship. There is a theological bias. And because the conclusions of them generally wind up confirming what they already believe, in spite of what historical analysis and unbiased scholarship tries to go for. Hence the whole 6th century and the 2nd century disparity. That I don't say it covers it all. I'm not saying it's all guilty of that. Just what I found so far. So, like I said, I'm still learning, still searching. But I see what you're saying there. I totally get what you're saying there, Jefferson Spatchcock. So I struggled with trying to with whether or not I should keep this in here, because if we look at this from what we're seeing, okay, essentially Daniel is a soothsayer, and the king has gone to the soothsayer to get an interpretation of a dream. Daniel is interpreting the dream, and he interprets it as a prophecy about the future. Okay? Now, the prophecy doesn't really say anything. It says empires rise and fall. They're already aware of this. So he's not telling him anything new. But what he's doing here, what's in the text, is a classic charlatan tactic. And that is how he's describing Nebuchadnezzar here. He starts off, you are the head of gold. You are the control, the power of all this. In this, he is appealing to Nebuchadnezzar's ego. He is building him up as what God has. He's like, God has built you up as this great power, and that's why you are the head of gold. That's why that is why the head of gold represents you. This is a tactic that charlatans use, that fake psychics and other people use. They build their target up. They build up their target's ego. They placate them. They get and that builds a sort of like foundation of trust, because they say, oh, there's this. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. This is what it is, and I'm a wise man, so here you go. And so now Nebuchadnezzar is more inclined to trust what he says after the fact. This is a classic charlatan trick: is play to the ego, build trust, and then sell them on something. And typically to either gain your money, because after the events of this, Daniel was supposedly heaped riches upon him for his interpretation of this, and he was elevated above all wise men in the kingdom. So we see that it's transactional. So I saw that as kind of like they literally wrote out how you can manipulate people when they already have a notion that you are already very wise, and Daniel supposedly was trained among the mystics and was the smartest of all of them because he got his knowledge from God. So, hey, Vesta Freya, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
In other words, the head of gold represented the Babylonian Empire.
Well, the Babylonians were really, really, really into gold. And I looked into this. I did some research of this. And the obsession with gold actually stems back very, very far. It goes back to primitive human beings and the notion that the sun held immense power. And I'm talking power in like the spiritual sense, not just the fact that the sun is a ball of gas, or basically a thermonuclear reactor. Of fusion, where hydrogen's fused into helium at temperatures of millions of degrees. That the sun made things warm, the sun allowed things to grow, And so the sun in essence was attached to the notions of life, that without the sun there'd be no life. So the sun is very, very powerful because the sun allows for life, which they weren't wrong, but they attributed anthropomorphic properties to this because primitive humans had a tendency to make things to anthropomorphize stuff to make it readily understandable. They would put their concepts onto the things, concepts of themselves onto the things to identify with them more easily. So the notion that the sun represented power, and then the discovery of gold, and that when processed and then shined up, gold being extremely shiny, reflecting of the sun, brilliant in the sunlight, then gold came to represent power because it reflected the sun, because it mimicked the sun, because if you saw this shimmering golden statue, you'd be like, whoa, it's so amazing. It's like the sun. It's pretty basic. So, but yeah, and the Babylonians were obsessed with it. Gold all over everything. In fact, other than what Mansa Musa did, they actually, with as far as the gold trade goes, they actually affected the actual price of gold. They used so much of it. Whereas Mansa Musa his actions actually decreased the value of gold for like 12 years because he hoarded it so much and he gave away so much. Like, he was so generous, just giving people gold all over the place, that he actually reduced the price. Tangelo converted me to hard atheism. Welcome to the club, Jefferson Spatchcock. Welcome to the club.
Since Nebuchadnezzar was the king of
Hey,
Babylon. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours.
That's actually incorrect. The kingdom that arose after Nebuchadnezzar was the Medo-Persian Empire. The Medo-Persians sacked Babylon and took power. And the Medo-Persians were a partnership kingdom. It was the Medes and the Persians working together took Babylon. And they were not inferior. They were greater in military power. They were greater in riches. They were stronger. And all what he's talking about is inferior, as it's understood in the Hebrew text, is that because there's multiple versions of the book of Daniel, which is depending upon which faith you follow, whether you're Jewish or whether you adhere to the Septuagint. There's like 3 chapters of the book that are not included in the book of Daniel by some faiths because they weren't included in the Hebrew Bible. It gets really problematic. But in this one, the word inferior here actually it appears in like 16 other places in the Hebrew text, and the word has multiple meanings. One of the other meanings of the word, and I can't remember the actual word itself, is earth. But in this instance, it's the only way that it's used as inferior. What it essentially means, it will arise another kingdom, and what some translations think what it actually means is that it would be a kingdom that envelops Babylon, that it would be a bigger kingdom, and that Babylon would sit within that kingdom. So, and the other issue is that they weren't inferior. They came and they were larger than them and occupied more earth than they did. And then, of course, their military was better. Their military was stronger. They had more riches. They covered more. They controlled more ground. So the Mede Persian Empire was not inferior in any way.
Then a third kingdom of bronze.
Which is weird because, technically, I mean, this can be interpreted in a number of ways because all these kingdoms use bronze. Bronze was cheap. Bronze was pretty much it was one of the, that's why there's a Bronze Age, then there was an Iron Age. So bronze is well known. Humans use it all over the place. Many kingdoms used it. So this is very, very vague.
Which shall rule over all the earth.
So a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. Obviously, there's never been a kingdom that ruled over all of the planet, because at the time that this was written, there was no knowledge of a Western Hemisphere. What was going on in North America and South America and Australia, they had no idea. Or even in like as far as like China and Japan, and so yeah. There was very limited knowledge here. So as far as they knew, but I think as far as they knew, all of Earth all of Earth pretty much ran from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Or if I got the Atlantic, Indian, yeah, Mediterranean Sea, the Aegean. Oh man, but geography is shit.
So we see this is predicting successive world-ruling empires.
It's not a prediction, it's an observation.
Babylon ruled from 605 to 539 BC. And the empire that came into power after Babylon was Medo-Persia, represented by the chest and arms of silver. And
see, and this is where we get into post-diction, because they were already aware of this when the book was written in the 2nd century, and they are attributing aspects of the dream to match what they already knew. So they're basically writing this in post.
just as silver is inferior to gold,
technically it's not. Metallurgically, it's not. Metallurgically, silver is actually superior to gold because it's harder, it's more durable, and it's more versatile. Gold is good, but silver is actually a superior metal, metallurgically speaking. The only reason gold is pretty much valued because of its rarity, and because it's so shiny and brilliant and new.
Medo-Persia wasn't as glorious as Babylon, and
It actually was more. It actually was
a dual kingdom, a coalition of the Medes and Persians.
Yes, it was a partnership kingdom, which is where it derived its power, which is why this partnership kingdom was able to sack Babylon.
Like the two arms in the statue. Not to mention taxes were paid in silver in Medo-Persia.
That's because silver was more readily available, because silver was less rare than gold.
Medo-Persia ruled to 331 BC and was succeeded by the Empire of Greece, represented by the belly and thighs of bronze. Did you know that Greek soldiers wore bronze armor when they went out to battle?
So the Greeks used bronze just like everybody used bronze. But the Greeks were not a kingdom of bronze. Everybody used bronze. So that's not a prediction. Everybody used bronze. If it had been the Romans used bronze. And even so, it would have been the Romans. Okay? Because they don't specify that because the prophecy doesn't specify that it would be the Greeks, or it would be the people from the land of Greece, or it would be people from this specific location on the planet that would. It just says a kingdom of bronze. Everybody used bronze. It's not a prophecy.
Greece ruled until 168 BC.
So, and the book of Daniel wasn't written until 165 BC. So all of this is already knowledge. Everybody is already aware of this when the book is being written. So post-diction fallacy.
And was conquered by the Roman Empire. Talking about the Roman Empire, verse 40 says, "And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others."
This is already saying that this happens.
Iron is the strongest of the four metals in the statue Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about, and that illustrates the fact that Rome ruled longer than...
This is actually incorrect, because this is the example of post-diction, because in the original dream there was no mention of Rome. Daniel never talked about an empire after the Greeks, and that's because later on in Daniel's life he has another dream. Okay, that is considered synonymous with the Nebuchadnezzar dream, and that is the dream that Daniel had after Nebuchadnezzar. He had a dream much later about the same thing, about four kingdoms coming after Babylon, and and he dreamed it as four beasts rising out of the sea. So Daniel's dream, I'm pretty sure, I want to make sure that I get it correctly. I want to get it right. I think I wrote it down. Oh, damn it. So, I think I may have. See, there was so much I wanted to cover. That was such a pain in the ass that I dropped stuff. I brought stuff up. So Daniel had a dream afterwards in which four beasts came out of the sea. And the first one was a lion, a winged lion, which in his mind represented Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. The second one was a bear, which in his mind, which he interpreted as representing the Medes. The third one was a leopard, which he interpreted as representing the Persians. And then, the fourth one was a chaos beast, which is referred to as a chaos beast. It was the 10 horns, the 10-horned chaos beast. And the way he interpreted it was that the chaos beast represented Greece, and specifically the little horn on the chaos beast was Antiochus. I think Antiochus or Antiochus. I think it's Antiochus. So, who persecuted the Christians. And or persecuted the Jews, my bad. Who persecuted the Jews. And so, there's never a mention of Rome. Ever. So, this right here is straight up post-diction fallacy. This is hindsight bias, because the Romans came in, but there was never a mention of Rome anywhere in the book of Daniel. At all. So, this is just him taking additional information and applying it to what was written. And essentially, this is what they did after the fact.
Its predecessors. Its rule lasted to 476 AD. And what happened in 476 AD is the Roman Empire was conquered by invading barbarian tribes who ended up dividing it into 10 territories.
Technically, it's a little bit more complicated than that. That's not exactly how it happened. There was a number of systemic problems in the Roman Empire, that led to its downfall. But it wasn't that the Roman Empire was just flat out conquered. The Roman Empire fell into decline and was slowly swallowed up, is essentially how that happened. But it wasn't conquered. In the way he's representing it, he's misrepresenting history on this. Either because he's ignorant of it or because he's trying to push his narrative.
This division is spoken about in verse 41, which says, "Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay." How much more precise can prophecy get?
That's not precise, because the Romans are never mentioned. You're taking a vague descriptor and then looking back and seeing the Romans and then applying the Roman label to the descriptor, because it can fit in some way. So no, this is absolutely hindsight bias.
Rome was divided.
Hey AJ Heeb, good to see you. Thank you so much. You notice I haven't addressed him yet. I see him in the chat, but it's not necessary. He's dishonest, so.
Not conquered by another kingdom, just as the Bible said it would be. The
Bible never said it would be conquered, and it wasn't conquered. But the Bible made allusions to the destruction of Rome when that's not the way it happened. So, because there were many events, and it doesn't indicate any one particular one, particularly plague, which was one of the biggest things that resulted in that. The effect of the plague across Europe, one of the big definers of, or one of the big shapers of human history.
toes of iron, or 10 divisions of the Roman Empire, ended up developing into the modern nations of Europe.
No, not so much. The Germanic tribes, the Scots-Irish, the Anglo-Saxons. This is very blank. There's a lot more nuance to this, and he's just lumping it all together into one thing to push to support a narrative. There's way more nuance. There's so much nuance to how the different countries around Europe formed post Roman Empire that. There was Roman influence, but these countries still had their own traditions, because it wasn't like everybody was just Roman. If you were within the Roman Empire, you weren't just considered Romans. Okay, you were considered within the Roman Empire. But once the Roman Empire collapsed, then these countries still had their cultures, their original cultures that they fell back on. So no, this is absolutely incorrect.
And Bible prophecy tells us they would attempt to unite with each other, but ultimately be unsuccessful. Verses 42 through 43 say, "And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile."
See, this is he's extrapolating beyond credulity here. It's like, this is why this is fringe. This is straight up fringe. Not to mention, he's quoting from the New King James Version, which already has problems in and of itself. You see why Sir Sick only covered the first one of this, okay? Because it's so problematic that, but there are people that follow this, but it's so problematic to do a complete video on this would have taken forever.
Iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to
that. There's no explanation for what that means. So, or how vague that is. It's incredibly vague.
To one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. There have been numerous failed attempts to unite the European continent throughout history.
No, there have been attempts to conquer Europe under one banner, numerous ones, but not to bring them under. That's not technically unification, but the European Union would be one of the best examples as to why. Because there are many countries in the EU, and there's also other things beyond that. This is just wild straw grasping.
Those who have tried and failed include
and this
Napoleon,
is where it gets weird.
Kaiser Wilhelm, Mussolini, Hitler, and more recently, the European Union, resulting in Brexit.
Yes, he just tied the Book of Daniel to Brexit. Which is, which obviously these are all problems. So, no, the Book of Daniel makes no mention of the events of World War I, the events of the French Revolution, the events of World War I, World War II, or even Brexit. This is just ridiculous.
This is how Bible prophecy has outlined the rise and fall of world-ruling empires, even to modern times, which proves that God exists, because no one would be able to predict events so precisely and so far into the future.
Well, that's the big thing. John Fabiano brings a point. He forgot Mao and Stalin, and that's because they weren't affecting the Europe. Effectively, they weren't trying to unify Europe. So he's excluding these, but you can see the problem there. It's the lack of awareness, is that they could only write about what they were aware of. And then he's extrapolating this out to the European continent, but Stalin would technically be closer in as far as empires go than Europe would be. Because it was Russia right above. So that's what doesn't make sense, is that it's, like I said, yes, big problems. Wesley Curry too, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. It says, a few days ago, Satan, while you were awake, told you in your mind to kill. To all on earth did Satan... no, that's not true. Not at all. It begs the question of Satan's existence.
But there's still one more major event outlined in Daniel chapter 2 that I have to mention before moving on to the next fact. Verse 44 says, and in the days of these kings... This is talking about the nations of Europe now.
This is the apocalyptic, or the apocalyptic vision, which eventually God's kingdom will come and will cast down all others, and God will reign. That the kingdom of heaven will reign supreme, and all the holy ones will be saved. So,
after Rome was divided, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. That means the kingdom of God.
Well, technically it won't stand forever, because the earth will not sustain life forever. So that's an impossible statement.
Is coming soon.
Well,
this is talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Which, actually, technically, if you go back to the text, the second coming of Jesus Christ is prophesied to be at the end of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire has long been gone. And that was when they were talking about, when this was written, they were anticipating that that Christ would return and be the end of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire would end with Christ's return, which never happened. But that tracks with understanding that the Book of Revelation was technically that whole the coming of the beast and everything was technically code for the Nero Redivivus legend, which is the idea that Nero, who persecuted the Christians relentlessly, that Nero would return, which was a fear the Christians had, that Nero would come back, that he was that evil, he was so evil, he was represented the adversary, and that Nero would return. which Nero never did. Nero died, humans died, that's pretty much it. But that's what the book of Revelation is pretty much thought to be about. It was Christians talking about the return of Nero, and that would be the adversary, and then Nero would be defeated by Christ, and that would be the second coming, and be the end of the Roman Empire, and then everything would reign out. But of course, like all of these kinds of apocalyptic prophecies, it didn't come true. And they predicted that's what was going to happen. It didn't happen. So they go back and they try to readjust. We see this all the time in apocalyptic predictions. The list of apocalyptic predictions out there of when the world was going to end or when Christ would return is long. Either using biblical numerology or trying to use the geopolitics as markers for when these things will happen. And they don't. Because it's horse shit, for lack of a better term.
And if you want to learn more about that and how to prepare for God's soon coming kingdom, keep watching to the end of this video. Fact number 2.
So this is where it gets really... So yeah, that was the first one. And that took forever. But here we go.
DNA is more complex than a computer program.
So now we're going to get into intelligent design. So first one down. First one debunked. Biblical prophecy does not prove God. And first and foremost, and I just want to state out the very first thing, it is a non sequitur that even if a prophecy comes true, it doesn't mean the prophecy came from God, and it does not logically follow that the Christian God exists just because a prophecy came true. Especially when that prophecy can be demonstrated to be a result of hindsight bias. So, doesn't matter. So even if a prophecy came true, it doesn't logically entail that God exists. That is a non sequitur. His entire first point is a logical fallacy.
People don't realize just how amazing our human DNA truly is.
It is amazing, but there are more amazing ones out there.
It's like an intricate computer program with a code number for each person that is 3 billion letters long.
Only 3 billion? Hell, fucking wheat. Wheat has literally 16 billion. So we're not the most complex out there.
Think about that. And according to what science has learned, 99.9% of our DNA is identical.
This is not a surprise. The results of the Human Genome Project reveal this. Our DNA is also 98% identical to chimpanzees. It's that like that 2% that results in the morphological differences between us and chimpanzees. Everything about us is different. So the fact that human beings are 99% identical, well, actually like 99.8 or something like that, with that small or 99.9 with that small 0.1% being the result of the morphological differences that you see in human beings, or heights, weights, genetic predispositions, all that such, hair color, eye color, skin tone. That 0.1% covers all of that. That's actually not good, because that means genetic diversity is essentially what geneticists found in the Human Genome Project is that human beings, there is so little genetic diversity in human beings that it's actually problematic for our survival. And that is because humans, as we were coming up over the past 300,000 years, encountered events that could have been, that were almost extinction events for our species. And that our species was reduced to such small numbers that it limited our genetic diversity. So while we do have all these people and we rapidly grew so fast, our genetic diversity is actually fairly limited. So, which is a bad thing. There's more genetic diversity between troops of chimps in the wild than there is between human beings, which is technically a bad thing. Because when you begin to lose genetic diversity in a species, it's one of the markers for its eventual extinction. One of the reasons why this is referred to is one of the many reasons why the Holocene is, we were considered to be in the 6th extinction event. With the combination of a lack of genetic diversity in human beings, climate change, and a number of other events.
Dr. Francis Collins, director of the Human Genome Project,
it's genome, not genome, genome,
the one that mapped the human DNA structure, said that one can think of DNA as an instructional script, a software program sitting in the nucleus of the human cell.
Okay, so this was a big one because I've read a lot of Francis Collins' work. He was appointed by Barack Obama as the head of the National Institute of Health at Bethesda, and people were. I started following his work when people were critical of Obama appointing Francis Collins, because Francis Collins is a Christian, and people were concerned that he would interpret information they were concerned that he would be biased. And from all I've been able to find, he's not. He doesn't allow his belief to inform his work. Francis, which is interesting because this second part that Greg has brought up is essentially intelligent design. Francis Collins rejects intelligent design as utterly ridiculous, and he understands evolution. He understands abiogenesis, and in his eyes, evolution and abiogenesis, the natural processes of these, is how God created everything. He does not accept a special creation event. He understands the age of the earth and how we independently confirm the age of the earth. He understands the science. For him, his religion, as he stated in his book, Genetics, the Language of God, he stated in his book that the natural processes that we observe are how God spoke to us, or how God created everything. That's essentially, we see God in the natural process. That there was no magic that was involved. That this is the way God did it, and that's why it's so amazing. And he also readily admits that belief in God cannot be achieved through logic and reason. Logic and reason will not get you to God. He acknowledges this. He acknowledges that it is irrational, that it takes a leap of faith in order to get there. You have to want to go there. So Francis Collins not only refutes the very point that Greg is trying to make here. So he's citing somebody who disagrees with him. Operative word right there, if you look in the quote, you can think of DNA as an instructional script, but it is not an instructional script. Just that there are mechanisms there that appear to be similar, but they're not the same. The big thing on this is that DNA and computer code, this is for you, Otangelo, just to break this down for you. DNA and computer code are not analogous. A code is a symbol which stands in place of a symbol. The four letters, GATC, guanine, adenine, thymine, cytosine, most definitely form a code. They are symbols for the names of the four major components of DNA. The names guanine, adenine, thymine, and cytosine are not codes, they are primary symbols. Primary symbols stand for real things and not for symbols. The real physical entities, guanine, adenine, thymine, and cytosine, are not codes. If anyone wants to call them codes, they need to point to the symbols which might be replaced by these codes. A computer code is a set of numerical values sufficient and necessary to the production of an end state from an initial state. Okay, Otangelo, let me repeat that. A computer code is a set of numerical values sufficient and necessary to the production of an end state from an initial state. DNA is necessary but not sufficient to the production of an end state from an initial state. This is the fundamental difference between the two of them. To claim that computer code and DNA are both codes is an abuse of the power of words and is not scientific. So, I want to make sure that you understood that, Otangelo, because that one was for you. I was hoping you'd pop around, okay? Because the two are not the same. You are abusing language when you do this. Understood? There should be no more argument about this whatsoever. Not to mention, and just to go back, Greg is citing somebody who doesn't agree with his position, who flat out rejects his position based upon the evidence.
Perry Marshall, an information specialist, comments on the implications of this, stating, "There has never existed a computer program that wasn't designed, whether it is a code or a program or a message given through a language. There is always an intelligent mind behind it." Okay, so this is an argument from incredulity. So Perry Marshall, for those who are not familiar with Perry Marshall is an electrical engineer. Okay, he was the son of a young Earth creationist pastor. He got his degree as an electrical engineer, and he now works as a business marketing consultant. He wrote a book called Evolution 2.0.
what was it? It was called, I want to make sure I cited it correctly. Evolution 2.0, Breaking the Deadlock Between Darwin and Design. And in it, he argued that DNA was created by a mind because there is no known natural process that creates codes other than a mind. But we have already shown, that that is an abuse of language. He is synonymizing DNA with computer code, and he is wrong on that. He is wrong to do that. His entire book is an argument from incredulity. That's all it is. And it was criticized heavily for that. Not to mention, he also misrepresented the creationist position and the naturalist position on both sides. In his book, he painted them both in the extremist ways he could. The extremist creationist position and the naturalist naturalist position. He made them both out to be extremists. So, no, his entire book was an argument from incredulity. Just because we can't fully describe a process or mechanistically explain how a thing came about does not entail that God exists. It's just a God of the gaps argument. You're inserting God to explain knowledge that we have. And even then, Otangelo, God is not an explanation because an explanation has mechanistic value to it. God did it is not an explanation. It's not. It's literally stopgap. Okay? It ceases further inquiry. If you say God did it, then we say, how did God do it? Where did God pull the matter from? Where did this energy come from? This is the same thing that you were trapped on the stage, Otangelo. You were trapped on that stage with that. And you literally said, you don't know. Okay? So yeah, there are things that we don't know, and we may know them in the future, we may not, but we're content with that. Well, we're not going to stick an answer where one is not justified, which is what you do. And this all came out on the last stage, on the last Discord stage. And you know this, Otangelo. Stop being dishonest.
That leads to the question of who wrote.
That's the problem, Otangelo. God did it is not an explanation. It's not. That is not the definition of an explanation. Okay? An explanation provides mechanistic understanding for the process. When you explain a thing, God did it is not an explanation. That's a dodge.
Wrote this script and who placed this advanced code inside the cell.
Nobody placed it there.
It obviously
Like I said, it's an argument from incredulity.
had
The
to
whole
be
book.
an intelligent being, and that being I present to you is the eternal God of the universe described in the Bible.
Okay, so the problem with that is that this goes back to Hume. Even if there was an intelligent designer, just because there is code there, just because genetics does what it does, and we don't understand how this, or we don't fully understand the mechanism behind how this arose naturally, even if there was a designer, you cannot logically get to the Christian God from that conclusion. This is another non sequitur. And which Hume explained all this out in like the 1700s, or in the 1600s. I think it was 1600s, but nonetheless, David Hume broke this all down as to why this doesn't work, and that you cannot logically get to the Christian God, even if there was evidence of a designer, which there is not, because evidence of designer would be efficiency and simplicity, not complexity and lack of efficiency, which our biological systems are wholly inefficient. A designer would make them, especially an omnipotent, omniscient designer, would make them, perfect. How can a perfect being create imperfectly? It's ridiculous. So, hey, Omniaurus Burrows, good to see you. Thank you so much. So, yeah. So the two people he cited here, one doesn't agree with his position at all, and in fact refutes it. Two, the second person quoted is that, like I said, Perry Marshall, not only is he an electrical engineer and a business marketing consultant, he has no background in genetics or evolutionary biology or chemistry. None whatsoever. So he's literally talking about something from a Christian perspective and not from a scientific perspective.
Fact number 3.
Jay Vers, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Good to see you here. And Jack Burton's in the house. Good to see you, Jack Burton. Thank you so much. Shroud is a hoax. Please keep clinging to it. Yeah, the Shroud is a hoax. Has been demonstrated to be so a number of times. He just refuses to accept it. This is just like, he's like, nope, I reject your reality and replace it with my own.
The Earth is designed to sustain life.
Already, the statement alone, begs the question of a designer and assumes that the Earth was designed just because life can be on the Earth.
There are numerous conditions that a planet...
McKinnon Mitchell says, we in the marketing field do not acknowledge him into our community. Please take him back. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. Oh, that's great.
Needs to meet in order to sustain life.
Okay, so now we're gonna so his first one covers biblical prophecy. His second one covers intelligent design. Both of them have been completely knocked down. Okay, they're logically fallacious conclusions. So his third one is about essentially cosmology. Is about Earth and how Earth can sustain life, and how for Earth to sustain life there must have been something that made it to sustain life. No, this is looking at it backwards. Is that it wasn't the Earth and life was on it. See, this is where the young Earth creationist nonsense gets into it, because the Earth, when the Earth formed, could not sustain life. In fact, after formation, there was about 1 billion years in which the Earth could not sustain life. It took about 1 billion years for life to finally get its foothold and start doing what it does naturally. And that doesn't count all the times that life almost got a foothold and failed. You know, that it requires the correct conditions for the elements to do what they naturally do. But it's just like a chemistry lab. If you're doing a massive chemistry experiment, if some of your variables are off, then the experiment won't work. If you're trying to get a particular conclusion, all of the levels have to be just right. And what you're waiting on is for the environment for the window to open naturally. And then once the window opens naturally, bam, you're off and running. Life does what it does. DNA is a self-replicating molecule that requires no agency for it to happen, and boom, it's off and running. Okay? But the window had to open, and that window was brief. And the window opens, and bam, life is here. And it just does what it does naturally. And between then and now 3 billion years, and 5 major extinction events to get to life now. So, in the life of the Earth, it took 1 billion years for life to get its first shot, life to get its first successful shot, as far as we can tell. 3 billion years and 5 major extinction events to get to where we are now, and by virtue of the sun, about a billion and a half more years left of habitability on this planet before the sun's luminosity increases to the point that the planet can no longer sustain life, that the planet will no longer be able to sustain water. So, which is happening slowly but surely. So, the window for survivability on this rock is actually, cosmologically speaking, very brief. Very, very short. There will be a point in time in the future where the planet will no longer sustain life simply by virtue of astronomy, just by virtue of how stars work. Our host star will eventually burn all life off of this planet. And that event will take place billions of years before the sun even expands and consumes the Earth in and of itself. And then there's also a matter of our rotational, or of our axis, of our obliquity, which also becomes problematic in the future. So there's a number of issues. Simply by virtue of orbital mechanics and the way stars work, our planet will not be able to sustain life for forever. So this is a temporary window that we have here. We're simply the only species on the planet that we can tell is aware of this, and that we need to get off the planet eventually. One day we have to. Otherwise, we're going to die here. So
that, if altered the slightest amount, would make that planet uninhabitable. And
this is not true. So the first thing he's going to talk about is the habitable zone, or what we call the Goldilocks zone. The habitable zone for the Earth runs from the habitable zone, as done by the mathematics. The habitable zone ranges from about 0.95 AU to about 1.63 AU, with AU being an astronomical unit, which is equivalent to 93 million miles, which is the distance from Earth to the Sun. Distance from Earth to the Sun is 1 AU. The habitable zone, so you can move Earth a little bit closer, or you can move it up to 1.63 AU away from the Sun, and the Earth would still be habitable. That's actually, cosmologically speaking, it's very, very small, but comparison to us, it's actually quite large. So there's actually a lot of wiggle room as to where the Earth could be as far as the habitable zone goes. And we actually happen to be just on the inside of that habitable zone. So just a little bit on the inside. AJ Heeb, thank you for the super chat. Thank you so much for $5 freedom dollars. Says, whose name rhymes with Brasso and block me because he's a scaredy cat. Worst content filter ever. Yes. Thank you so much for that super chat, AJ Heeb. I do appreciate it. Those super chats really help me to continue doing this and making this channel go. So thank you so much for the support there, bud.
And Earth meets all of those conditions. Coincidence? I think not. Let me give you a few examples. The Earth is just the right distance from the Sun.
No, it could be further away. It just happens to be here.
It's not too close and not too far. This is important because if it would be too close, then it would be too hot, and the heat of the Sun would boil up all of the water. And if we would be farther away from the Sun, it would be too cold and the water would freeze. But fortunately, the Earth revolves around in what is called the habitable zone.
This doesn't preclude that extremophiles would not still exist on the Earth. It just means that life as we know it right now wouldn't be able to form. But extremophiles do exist. That extremophiles that can live in extreme heat or can live in extreme cold. It just means that those extremophiles would survive, and life may look extraordinarily different than it does now. Because the extremophiles didn't overtake everything because everything else overtook it. And so extremophiles didn't get the opportunity that they needed in order to evolve along different evolutionary pressures. So those pressures didn't affect them because they were affecting everything else. But imagine the extremophiles on the planet left to their own devices and their own, they would look far different than they do now because the environment would be far different than it is now. So, yeah.
Of the Sun. This is a narrow zone where conditions for life are just right. In addition, the Earth rotates at just the right speed.
McKenna Mitchell says, maybe controversial, but there's too many people on Earth, and we should combat climate change on our end. But the Earth is going to solve this problem soon enough. I don't think we will all die, but yeah, this is true. The Earth has a tendency to shake off major issues, and the Earth will correct itself with or without us. I mean, if the Earth has to go into if this goes away, and this is actually really problematic. I'm glad you brought this up, McKinnon, because the Supreme Court there is a case going before the Supreme Court, which is the state of Virginia versus EPA, and the state of Virginia brought about a suit against the EPA, stating that the Clean Climate Act, which Obama enacted when he was in office and was basically shut down by Trump and just kind of made it dead in the water, that they are fighting against the regulations for putting out greenhouse gases. And if that goes through the Supreme Court and they knock that down inside of the state of Virginia, then virtually all that will be a giant setback for our efforts against climate change. And that opens up a number of other doors for combating legislation that regulated the output of greenhouse gases, CO2 and other greenhouse gases. So, given what the Supreme Court recently did with women's rights and how they're considering going, and how Clarence Thomas wants to go back and look at, LGBTQ marriage, same-sex relationships, and access to contraceptives. Then you've got people who want to go back and look at Brown versus Board of Education, going into school segregations, going into interracial marriage, and then of course they're looking at attacking climate change efforts or stemming climate change regulation by going back and rescinding this stuff as well. We live in dangerous times. Dangerous times. We don't know what's going to happen, but it probably will not be good. Especially if the Supreme Court basically says that the climate change regulation, it's improper for that. Essentially, the Supreme Court could rule that the federal government cannot regulate the states in determining how to combat climate change, and it should be up to the states, which means that all of the fossil fuel energy producing states will have no regulation as to how they do it. Screw it. They can just produce what they want. That's scary. But thank you for bringing that up, McKinnon.
To keep one side of the planet from freezing from lack of sun, and the other from becoming scorched by constant sun exposure. Then there's our
which is going to happen anyway in $1.5 billion years. It's estimated that about roughly $1.5 billion years, when the sun's luminosity naturally increases to the point that the Earth will become so hot it will no longer sustain water. Aaron Reese says that the opinion that the death of the human race is the same as the end of the world is arrogant. We have to find a way to reduce the population without a resulting economic collapse. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And yeah, once the human race is gone, just like the 99% of species that lived on this planet are now extinct, we are just one of them. And once we go, this rock will keep on spinning. And nature may select for some other species that manages to out-survive us. Maybe the cockroaches or the bees or the octopus. Who knows? But ultimately, we're just one more species amongst the 99% of other species that are all currently dead, the species that are currently going extinct right now as we speak. That's pretty much it.
Atmosphere. It's around 21% oxygen. Just the right amount for life.
Pretty much.
If there would be too much oxygen, then we would have raging forest fires everywhere and huge bugs, because a bug's size is proportionate to the oxygen in the air.
This is incorrect. Well, not totally incorrect, but there was a point in time in Earth's atmosphere when the oxygen was extraordinarily higher than it is now, and insects did get extremely large because of the oxygen. But there were not raging forest fires everywhere when the oxygen levels were that high. For there to be raging forest fires everywhere, that would pretty much trigger whenever lightning struck. Then that would be because for there to be of that nature, then the atmosphere in itself would ignite. For the Earth to be like a raging ball of just if the oxygen level was like 90%. But there was a point in time when nitrogen levels were lower, oxygen levels were higher, and bugs got to extreme sizes because of and they weren't even really super. You're talking about like 6-foot millipedes and shit like that. But yeah, putting the two together doesn't track. He doesn't understand science. Thank you, Dr. Nimrod, for 20 sex. I always love me some sex. Says, tell Grassy I'm a pope for real and for bacon sex. Hell yes, he is the bacon pope. Can't deny the bacon pope. Jefferson Spassky says, Jesus should come back and fix the environment. He can start with his leftover death cult, who forgot they were supposed to be stewards of the planet he made. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And thank you, Dr. Nimrod, for that 20 sex. I appreciate that.
If our oxygen level was too low, that could cause oxygen depravity, which results in nausea.
Oxygen deprivation. Oxygen depravity. Bad oxygen. You're depraved. You're just depraved. Yeah, it's oxygen deprivation. I don't know. Someone needs to check Greg's scripts before he reads them.
Fainting, loss of consciousness, and even death. These are just a few of the conditions necessary for life to exist on Earth. There are many, many more.
There's a few. Yeah, there's a few. But essentially what Greg is doing here is the sentient water puddle. Is Douglas Adams' analogy. Is that the water puddle looks around and says, oh, wow, look at this hole that I fill. I fill it so perfectly. It fits me so perfectly that it must be made for me. And no, life evolved within the parameters of the Earth, the parameters that were available. So that's why we look the way we look. That's why we articulate the way we articulate. That's why we function the way we function, given gravity, given the environment, given the climate, given the temperature, the ambient temperature. All of these were evolutionary pressures. If any of them were different, then like if the gravity were stronger, life could still be here. We would just look different in order to evolve to the intenser gravity. If gravity were lighter, we would also look different there. So, yeah, so these are just evolutionary pressures. He's basically looking at us the way we are now and assuming that we are special. So, which we are not. We just happen to be the result of life evolving on this planet per the evolutionary pressures that were there.
Earth was designed to sustain life.
That's a
just as God tells us it was in His Word. Isaiah chapter 45 verse 18 says, For thus saith the Lord, that created the heavens, God himself, that formed the earth, and made it.
Which is a claim, which they can't back up.
He hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited.
Formed it to be inhabited, and looking at it as there are things that are inhabiting it, so it must be formed. See, that's exactly what Douglas Adams was pointing out in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's wrong on this. This is hindsight bias.
I am the Lord, and there is.
Humans walk around, they look around at the earth, it's like, wow, there's all this food that I can eat, there's all these resources that I have, and I'm smart, and I can function here, and I can survive here. This terrarium must have been made for me. That's not the way it works.
None else.
This
Fact
is
number
fallacious
4.
reasoning.
Humans have a sense of morality.
This is the worst. Now we're getting into like the philosophy of morality and how morality is subjective. So we're getting into philosophy, the Euthyphro Dilemma. Objective morality cannot exist. The morality is that if a God exists, morality is either subjective to God, or if God does not exist, morality is subjective to us. Just because we have a sense of morality, sensing kind of like a sense of what is right and wrong, doesn't apply universally to the entire human species, and it doesn't apply in the same way across the species. It's not ubiquitous. What it is that it depends upon what you have morality concerning. And the fact that moral valuations are also subjective, so that means we don't have a universal sense of morality. We just have an idea in our minds subjectively as to what is a moral action, what is not a moral action, dependent upon the consequences.
In every culture,
and this would have been a trait that would have been positively selected for, because those who were more morally inclined, as via empathy, because empathy is an evolved ability of the brain, that those who were more empathetic were more inclined to survive because they wouldn't kill off people, they would have kids, and they would be more inclined to keep their children alive. So those who were not morally inclined were typically ostracized from the group and left out to die, which is a positive selection pressure, meaning that empathy was positively selected for, and an empathetic species gained ground, which was a positive a positive feedback loop, allowing us to expand and basically conquer the planet. That's all it is that we typically killed the people who were not empathetic, and we kept the people that were empathetic, which is technically an artificial selection process. So we artificially selected for love and empathy, and artificially selected out a trait we didn't like, which was antisocial behavior. Nowadays, it's different. Nowadays, we don't ostracize. We still ostracize if we put them in prison or put them in asylums, but we still keep them alive, and we still allow them to breed at certain points. So, this is why this occurred.
And every tradition in society, men and women have an intuitive sense of right and wrong.
We have an evolved sense of right and wrong, and it's because we artificially selected for it by kicking out and ostracizing all the people who did not, or if they had a limited sense of morality, or if they continued to act selfishly against the group, boom, we got rid of them. So we actually did it to ourselves.
The basic principles behind what Scripture calls the 10 Commandments,
which was preceded by the Hammurabi Code. The Hammurabi Code actually had the first instance of what the idea of murder was, and that was killing someone. That was the unjustified killing of another human being. But it only pertained to that particular group. That individual groups that were separate from one another all kind of had their same rules regarding the killing of each other, but had no rules regarding the killing of people outside of their groups, especially groups that threatened to take their resources or threaten to kill them or do whatever. So it applied to the group, but not to the people outside the group. Don't kill each other, because this is the group, this is the society we live in. Don't kill one another, but if someone comes along and tries to take your shit, you can go ahead and kill them. Or if they don't believe what you believe, you can go ahead and kill them. So you see the positive feedback loops in what we believe. That the reason was because religion spread at the tip of a sword. If people disagree with you or don't want to live by your rules, then you kill them so they're not a threat to your rule. Artificial selection.
laws against murder, adultery, theft, dishonor to parents.
I mean, hell, it wasn't even until ancient Greece when the philosopher and it was the philosopher Draco came up with the first idea of manslaughter, which was murder, but not under the auspices of not under the definition of like murder in and of itself. But manslaughter was action resulting in a death where the death was not intentional. So it took to ancient Greece to even get to that concept. But yeah, the idea of not killing each other is just a result of evolutionary game theory. Is that selfish action results in negative consequences in the long term, and cooperative action leads to positive outcomes in the long term. If we work together, we get better outcomes. If we all fight amongst each other, and then we'll eventually destroy ourselves. So we figured this out very, very early on when we were like little nomadic tribes running around the world. So yeah, we artificially selected for empathy and artificially selected for cooperative action by basically culling those that did not support that or were mentally ill, psychopathic, sociopathic. But even then, psychopaths and sociopaths were an evolutionary pressure because those individuals culled the weak because they targeted the weakest of the humans. So sociopaths and psychopaths would target the weakest, and those individuals would not go on to breed. So it actually made the species stronger when it comes to life. So everything played a part. The presence of sociopaths and psychopaths, serial killers, whatever, they played a role in forging what we are as human beings now, as did us trying to remove them from society. Both of them pressures.
Parents and others can be found in nearly every civilization on Earth. Where does our sense of morality come from?
It was evolved. We explained this.
Evolutionists don't have an adequate explanation for
I just explained it.
For this, because if we evolved, that means that there are no moral absolutes.
Well, yeah, there are no moral absolutes, and this is evidenced by human history. That there is no absolute morality that pertains to everything. Every group, morality is subjected to the person, subjected to the group, subjected to the community, subjected to the nation, subjected to the world. The difficulty is trying to find a middle ground that every person can agree on. The problem is, emotions get in the way of that, because how I feel gets in the way of these things. That's the difficulty. There is no moral absolute. And Christians thinking that they can say, ours is the absolute, is the peak of arrogance.
Right and wrong are subjective, and whatever helps you or your species survive is the right thing to do.
Correct. Yes, well, that is if the well-being of the species is a priority for you. If the well-being of the species is something that you consider is a subjective priority for you, then yes, then that would be. But for some people, it's not. Namely, the people who don't care about the destruction of the environment and and only want the subjugation of people for their own profit.
And you wouldn't feel bad. You wouldn't have a guilty conscience for doing things like stealing or murdering.
I'm telling you, there are people out there who murder and have no guilty conscience about it. There are people out there who have done it justified and have no guilty conscience. There are people out there who commit justified homicide or justified theft in order to survive, in order to keep themselves alive or keep their children alive, and they still feel guilty about it. There are people that do it and that don't. Okay? There are people who don't do it because they already feel guilty about it. So this is completely and totally subjective. And it's also there's mitigating circumstances. It is not a universal thing where he's saying that it is. Of course, all this presumes that God is there, and that this is all banking on God being the objective moral standard, which it is not. If God exists, then what is moral is just subjective to what God decrees. But we can't conclude that, so morality is subjective to what we decree. Which is why, there's a difference between the morality of the Roman Empire, the morality of the Mongols, the morality of the Middle East, China, Japan, Australia, Africa, North America, so on and so forth. There's variations all throughout.
If you thought that ensured your survival. However, we do have a guilty conscience when we do something wrong.
Not always, because sometimes it's justified and you have no reason to feel guilt. But in his definition, in his worldview, would still be a violation of those rules. So he's wrong.
And believers and non-believers alike both have at least some universal sense of morality.
No, we don't. And that is a false claim. And here's the big thing on this, is that we would feel bad, is that the thing about atheists or agnostics or people who are not Christians, in our worldview, we adhere to the the evolved sense that we have of empathy, of love, of societal cohesion, survival of the species, and yes, we acknowledge that it is subjective, and there is overlap between people as to what we don't want to die, we want to continue living, so on and so forth. The difference is that in our system, there is no consideration for being ordered to kill by God. So, in their worldview, in the Christian worldview, God could order someone to murder somebody. And in their worldview, it would be good. It would be morally right to do so because God ordered it. There is no consideration for this in the secular system, which makes the secular system inherently more moral than the Christian one.
Which, ironically, is based on many of the Ten Commandments. So
Which were ripped from the Hammurabi Code.
if this didn't evolve, where did it come from? The
It did evolve. I explained how it did.
Bible tells us that it is God-given. He has written his...
It's inherent because it's a part of our genetic makeup. We artificially selected for it. Because it's a feeling, they assume that the feelings have to come from somewhere. Where does the feeling come from? Technically, it's coming from our brains, but in our most primitive times when we didn't understand the function of the brain and how the brain operates, when we didn't understand the brain at all, its kind of relationship to the body, we assumed it came from somewhere exterior to us. What gave it to us? Where does this come from? It obviously must come from somewhere. It comes from God, so on and so forth.
law in our hearts. Psalm chapter 40 verse 8 says, I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart.
See, that's where the idea comes from. It's very poetic to say this, but it comes from inside. That's because that's the way you feel. Your feelings don't come from God; they come from your brain, and they're formulated through they're basically your emotions, your emotional responses are developed over time as your brain wires itself to the external stimuli around you.
Fact number 5: there are similarities in the natural world.
So now we're getting into evolution. Which is where he's going with this. Now we're getting into evolution as where he's basically going to go is that homology is evidence of a common designer. That common structures are evidence of a common designer, which in and of itself is a non sequitur.
Have you noticed how nearly all creatures on Earth have similar physical features?
Yeah, it's a result of evolutionary pressures and what we call, and it's evolution. It's that things will evolve with similar structure, but not everything. It's actually by the number of creatures that live on this planet, it's actually a small sect of them, a small group of them that have homologous structures. Typically, between mammals, insects, sea life, so on and so forth. And it depends on where they are and where they evolved. But homologous structures just prove common ancestry. It doesn't prove a common designer. Not to mention all the failings and errors that occur in reproduction. Obviously, if there was a designer, the designer was terrible.
Mouths, noses, eyes, ears, and so much more.
And there are species that don't possess. There are species out there that don't possess any of those. Bacterium. Don't have ears, don't have eyes, don't have noses, don't even really have mouths as like we would define a mouth, that don't have legs. There's species out there that don't have these things. He's kind of like grouping all of like land life and some sea life. Because there's sea life out there that doesn't have legs, that doesn't have ears, because they don't need it. Because the evolutionary pressures were there to necessitate the evolution of them. So they may have like light sensing organs, but even then go deep enough in the ocean, there's life there that doesn't require any of that. So
evolutionists may
I think this is if Jefferson Spatchcock, if you're still in the chat, or someone in the chat, you can correct me. Hey, Smack Dab, good to see you. I think this is the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Is that he's taking a small amount of data that supports his narrative and he's cherry picking is what it is, or Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Extrapolating a conclusion about everything from a small amount of data. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Or cherry picking fallacy.
To say that's because we all evolved from similar life forms.
Yes.
But what if that's not the reason at all?
What if it's the operative word, Greg, he says what if. But we know that's not the case. We know that is not the case. We have demonstrated common ancestry. We understand it implicitly. Take a phylogeny, study phylogeny. That's all I have to say.
What if, instead, these similarities exist because we all have the same creator?
That's a big what if, and you can't demonstrate it and to conclude that it is a non sequitur.
And they are fingerprints of God. To put this into
They're
perspective, an artist might have a certain style of painting, and someone familiar with his style may be able to recognize his different paintings. The same is true with God. He apparently has a certain style.
Watchmaker. This is the watchmaker fallacy. McKenna Mitchell, the interior decoration of this guy's apartment has Patrick Bateman vibes. Use a coaster, Gene. Absolutely, yeah. It's thank you so much, Jefferson Spatchcock, for $4.99 freedom dollars. Keep up the good work. I appreciate the videos. Thank you, Jefferson. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I had to do this one live because trying to do creative content on this it was too taxing. And I kept having to go back and go back and go back, and I couldn't do this, so, ugh. Jack Burton, McKenna Mitchell, you like Huey Lewis in the news? I fucking love that monologue. I absolutely do. Hey, Paul!
Of creating things, and that's why there are so many similarities in the natural world.
No, it is not. We've demonstrated common ancestry. We understand common ancestry. We can, all of the fields of science that go into doing this, we've already explained it. And he is just tacking common designer on there with no basis. There's no basis for that whatsoever. Like I said, nonsense.
Hebrews chapter 3 verse 4 tells us, "For every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God."
See, that's, So yeah, that's legit the watchmaker fallacy. And even if the argument got you to a designer, which it doesn't, that argument does not lead to the Christian God.
Fact number 6: the laws of nature demand a lawmaker.
Another non sequitur. So you see I should have done a drinking game with the number of fallacies that pop up in this, but we'd all be dead before the end of it. The laws of nature are also it's describing what is a law of nature is difficult, and there's a lot of argument as to what specifically is a law of nature. When you can say the law of gravity, or you could say the laws of thermodynamics, or and the differences between laws and principles and theorems. There's a lot. This gets into really, really heady territory. He's using these terms very, very colloquially in order to push his narrative. He's not digging. So this is all basic surface shit that he's using. Because if you even begin to dig underneath the surface, all of this falls apart. But nonetheless, because there are laws of nature, means there's someone who had to make those laws? No, that does not follow.
Scientists have identified numerous laws of nature that govern our lives. For example, a hot cup of tea will become cold if you don't drink it fast enough.
Say laws of thermodynamics.
Gravity remains steady, the speed of light is constant, and the Earth rotates in 24 hours.
Well, I mean, Earth's rotation is, not technically a law, but
these laws are consistent.
Not necessarily. They weren't. They change, and we know this. We know that they were different at the beginning. At the beginning of the start of the visibility of our universe, they were different. And we know that towards the end, when there is no more matter in the universe and the last black hole is completely and totally evaporated, Hawking radiation, we know that the laws will not apply. So that's why when I argue these things, I refer to local uniformity. That the changes, that cosmological timescales are so vast that they appear to be uniform. But in actuality, cosmologically speaking, they are not. They will eventually break down and they won't apply anymore because the components necessary for their application will no longer exist. So that's why this is problematic. is that this is talking about like uniformity of nature, like that. Well, nature is not uniform at all. Nature is consistently changing. We just live such tiny lifespans that we cannot observe cosmological change.
If any of them would change at any time, that could lead to a disaster.
Well, they will. They'll change over vast quantities of time, like tens of billions of years, or even further, even larger than that. So it just takes time. Just because it's not going to happen within our lifetimes, which we don't know, but just because we don't observe it, these grand cosmological changes occurring doesn't mean they're not occurring. It's just very, very slow. It's akin to like watching a tree grow, which even then is light speed compared to cosmological changes.
Imagine what would happen if gravity just decided to stop working. We would fly off the globe. The fact that there are observable, constant, orderly, natural laws means that there was some kind of intelligence behind them.
No, this is also fallacious reasoning. It's essentially looking at what we have now and extrapolating out that that's the way it will always be. And it will not, and that's the way it always was. No, that's not the way it always was. And we know that demonstrably. It's not the way it will always be. We know that demonstrably. So this is just, I do not know what the name of this fallacy is. It might be a fallacy of deductive inference. Or a fallacy of, what is it called? Son of a bitch. I can't remember what that was. Anyway, yeah, I can't remember specifically what the name of that is, but I know he's drawing an inappropriate conclusion from the evidence.
And that intelligence was God.
True, Ida Pimp Udaho. At least he says we're on a globe. At least he acknowledges the spherical model.
God. Fact number 7. Many cultures have a flood myth.
So this is also not proof of God, because we know that the flood myth in Noah, we know that the Noah myth was plagiarized from earlier cultures. Was plagiarized from the Sumerian myth. And we know that other cultures have different myths, but not all cultures have myths. Which, the fact that he says many cultures have a flood myth, but he doesn't say all cultures have flood myths, because not all cultures have flood myths. The cultures that experience localized flooding have myths. And they take different forms. And not all of them involve a wiping of sin from the earth. Not all of them involve punishment. Not all of them involve a boat. They're all the ones that do have them are wildly different. And not all cultures have them, because not all cultures experienced localized mass flooding in the particular areas where they lived. But we notice when we go back and look at human history that the areas of the earth that experienced massive flooding after the last ice age, that experienced that massive flooding, those where the flood myths arose. But those areas of the earth where there was no experience of this, there is no flood myth. So he doesn't address. So this is a big problem for this. Not to mention, just because cultures had flood myths doesn't entail, it does not logically follow that God exists from this. And just because it was written in the Bible, and we know that it was taken from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a Sumerian myth, this has already been debunked. So,
flood myths are common across a variety of cultures all over the world,
but not
and
all
are
of them.
as old
And not
as
all
the
over the
most
world.
ancient civilizations known to man. The oldest one is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which dates back nearly 5,000 years.
Which the Bible one was plagiarized from.
There, the great sage Utnapishtim is warned that
He can pronounce Utabishdem, but he can't pronounce genome. What the hell?
an imminent flood is to be unleashed by wrathful gods, so he builds a boat to save his family and some animals. There's also a Hawaiian myth which says that a man named Nu'u made a great canoe with a house on it and filled it with animals. Floodwaters covered the entire earth and only...
Which is impossible. Which we know is flat out impossible. That the amount of water that it would... the amount of water it would take to cover the entire earth, given what we know about the earth, this is physically... This is literally the breaking of reality. The only way you can explain this is God magicked it. which is not an explanation.
Only Nu'u and his family
Literally
survived.
appeal to
Then
divinity.
there's an Aztec story which claims a devout couple hid in the hollow part of a large tree with 2 ears of corn while storms drowned the wicked of the land.
But and I looked into this one. The Aztec myth is not a global flood. It's not. So, and this is why it's weird.
And let's not forget the Bible's flood story,
Which was plagiarized from Gilgamesh.
where God told Noah to build an ark to prepare for a great flood that was going to destroy the wicked.
And Nano brings up a good point. So all the people drowning were also writing down different flood myths at the time. The difference is that in all of these cultures, and one thing he doesn't point out, which is also extremely damaging to his point, is that these myths were written down at different times, and they covered different periods of time. So and they're not identical, which is what's weird. Is that what we can extrapolate from this is that human beings at different times had different experiences of localized flooding, and they interpreted it as massive flooding that, covered whatever. And then there were myths that came up around these things, like why is this happening, and the explanations of why this is occurring. And so this is where this came from. And not all floods were as a result of wickedness or evil or sin. So, but the extrapolation, several of them do cover that. Because why would vast amounts of people be killed because of flooding? Well, they must have done something wrong to deserve to be punished by the gods we already believe exist. They must have been punished for something that they did. And then we see how that conclusion comes from there.
Noah and his family survived. You can read more about that in Genesis chapter 6 through 9. In addition, there are over 200 flood myths around the world. And even though the details of these stories tend to differ at times, if a worldwide flood never happened, then why are there so many stories about it?
Because humans interpret things very similarly. Because, like the genetics says, we're 99.9% identical. Humans interpret things similarly. We all are subject to the same type 1 and type 2 errors. This is why this happens.
And if it did,
not proof of a god. Just because humans interpret things similarly does not mean a god exists. This is just a non sequitur.
Happen, which I believe it did, that is evidence for the existence of God, because God sent the flood according to the Bible.
That's begging the question, the truth of the Bible, which begs the question of God's existence. It's just fallacy after fallacy. Oh, you understand why this was so difficult.
Fact number 8. Most calendars include a 7-day week.
So, Plothole says, I'm restreaming your stream. Thank you, Plothole. I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. So, who just remembered the Mr. Deliso, or Delicio, or whatever, however he pronounced his name? 7-day calendar dude. I will say this. 7-day calendar dude, which I will call him from now on. Yes, Sean Alexander, the 7-day bullshit all over again. Jack Burton says, don't cross the streams. So, the kicker on this one is that Mr. Deliso went on Skeptic Generation and talked with Eric. And Eric, I'm a big fan of Eric. I love the work that he does. He is far more capable of maintaining his cool than I am at certain points. And he jumped on this, and essentially the 7-day, and he basically exposed the flaw in this, is that the 7-day cycle is only true because it's not true universally. That if there was life on, that if we moved, essentially, if life was on Mars, and then it wouldn't be true for Mars, because Mars doesn't. So it's literally an extrapolation of what we already have, and it doesn't apply anywhere else on the planet. And that he got Mr. Deliso to admit that it's only true, that it will only be true so long as it stays this way. And it wasn't always this way. So it's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, NA, thank you so much for the super chat. $6.66 freedom dollars. Says there has been localized all over the world at some time. So yeah, exactly. Localized flooding experienced all over the world by humankind. I'm assuming one of the worst would probably be when the valley that became the Mediterranean flooded, and it developed and created the Mediterranean Sea occurred. That would be some of the worst. And I can understand why people would be, massive flooding, especially those that lived within the valley would have been, those settlements would have been destroyed. So I can understand that, but that's not what is reflected all over the world, and those flood myths all come from different time periods, and they all cover different times, and they're not all associated with wickedness or evil or the expunging of evil from the world. So, good point there, NA. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that.
Have you ever wondered why the 7-day week is almost universally observed in the present world?
No, we observe it because it's supported by mathematics, and there's a dozen factors that have gone into why it's used, why it eventually came to be what it is, why it was essentially going all the way back to the Babylonians. So way before Christ's time. So of course the names of them come from Germanic myths and Old Norse. So there's a lot of factors that go into this that pretty much destroy the fact that this is any kind of proof of a god.
What is it a measurement of?
It's a measurement of it's how we break up the day so we can. It's a measurement of time. It's a measurement of Earth's rotation, Earth's orbit of the sun. That's what it is. And it's completely and totally arbitrary.
I mean, the 24-hour day is a measurement of how long it takes the Earth to make a full rotation on its axis.
Oh, and leap years as well. Leap years also. Leap years, essentially leap years, which are the culmination of the fact that the amount of time are not precise whole numbers. That I think if I remember correctly, that the day is actually technically something like 24 hours and so many minutes, and so we have to that extra time we stick into February 29th, which comes around every 4 years. That's how we mathematically keep these things. But in actuality, the numbers don't suss out that way.
The year is a measurement.
So the existence of the leap day of February 29th completely blows this one out, completely debunks this.
Of how long it takes the Earth to revolve around the sun, and the month is an approximate interval between new moons. But the week has no astronomical basis whatsoever, yet we order our lives in...
Well, no, we did it because this stems back to the Babylonians. The Babylonians broke that up, but I think that they used a 6-day week, or maybe a 7-day week. But nonetheless, this is just ridiculous. It's a complete and total misrepresentation, or it's leaving out a lot of history that goes into why it is this way. And it was a slow development to get us to this point.
A 7-day cycle, working 5 or 6 days, and taking
because originally there weren't even 12 months, so
a day or two off to rest before repeating the process. Why do we do that? I'll tell you why. Actually, I'll let the Bible tell you why. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11 says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor."
But this assumes that the 7. Okay, so he's basing the 7-day cycle. The reason we keep this because there was a 7-day, because there was 6 days of creation, then God rested on that, and that humans should reflect that we should work for 6 days, then we should rest on the 7th day. And that's where he's going like this. But there are some cultures that think that Saturday is the 7th day. Seventh-day Adventists believe that the 7th day is Saturday, and that is their holy day. Some faiths believe that it is Sunday, and that's their rest day. So, this is completely arbitrary.
"And do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant,
blah, blah,
nor
blah.
thy cattle, nor thy stranger
The cattle ain't gonna work.
that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and
So it's
rested
just a reflection.
the 7th day."
What he's assuming is we get that the fact that we adopted a 7-day cycle, that we have the 7-day week now, is a reflection of the creation myth, and that means God is true. And that's his reasoning. That because we adopted it, then that must give credibility to the 7-day creation period of Earth and heaven, of the 7-day creation myth. And because we adopt the 7 days, that proves that God exists, which does not. That's also another non sequitur.
Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. The 7-day weekly cycle goes all the way back to the beginning of Earth's history.
No, it absolutely does not.
When God created everything in 6 days and rested on the 7th day,
Begging the question.
instituting it.
And plus, we already know that the 7-day cycle, we know that it's a myth. There's very few denominations of Christianity that still accept what it is. They consider it a myth. They understand that the Earth is a little over 4 billion years old. That number's been independently verified from zircon crystals that were harvested from the moon. And so we know the age of the Earth. We know how long it took to form. We know the process. And that it's widely known that the creation thing is a myth. And so just because a myth may have inspired what we have here today doesn't mean that the God behind that myth is real. This is just completely absurd.
As a holy day of rest for mankind. Fact number 9. Some things could not have evolved.
Okay, so here we go back to intelligent design again. That there appeared that in their eyes that things are so complex they couldn't have evolved, and which is also because we understand evolution. We know that this is just an ignorant statement.
The
Completely
theory of
erroneous.
evolution attempts to explain the origin of life apart from the intervention of God. But there are some major flaws with this theory. One of
Boomer just sent me a message. Says 23 hours 56 minutes as Caesar and Sosigenes. Let me know if I mispronounced that. Sosigenes of Alexandria are rolling in their graves about the calendar. Yeah, agreed.
them is the fact that some living systems are so complex that they could not have evolved. The term for this is irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity
Which has already
means
been
that you
debunked.
have to have all of the parts of a living organism in place in order for it to work properly.
No, that's not how evolution works. This is a complete misrepresentation of how evolution works. Evolution does not go piece by piece. Evolution occurs all over, across the entire spectrum. And complex systems develop from simpler systems as their complexity arises from that. So this is saying that, like, in their eyes, with the way they think, is take the human eye, which I think he brings up. The human eye, they think evolved that it's so complex now that it would need to have evolved each part. It's literally, yes, AJ Heap, it's literally begging the question. You are absolutely correct. And this has already been, we already understand that this is how this is wrong and how this is fallacious reasoning. It's complete misunderstanding of biology and evolutionary biology, so.
Otherwise, it just won't work. One example of this is the human eye.
Yes.
The human retina is so advanced that it is far more complex than any computer chip. Even Charles Darwin admitted in his book,
Why do they always go to Darwin? Why? Like he's some fucking pillar.
Origin of Species. To suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree.
And that's because Darwin had a very, very limited understanding. This is the idea of evolution came from this, but he still struggled with the idea of complex systems existing from this. So yeah. But why not cite somebody from today? Now that we understand how these things took place, how we got from light-sensitive organs to the eyes that we have today. Not to mention, there are species out there with far more complex eyes than we have. Mantis shrimp. Far more complex eyes than we have. So, it's just ridiculous.
Your eye.
And yet, Sean Alexander, and yet the human eye is one of the weakest of most species. Agreed. Not to mention, the way it evolved with the way the optic nerve is attached to it is, just creating blind spots, not good.
Is so advanced that the back of your eyeball is about 1 square inch, but contains over 137 million light-sensitive cells.
There are animals that have more. There are animals that have less.
The skill that it takes to accomplish something like that
It's not skill. It's a slow evolution over hundreds of millions of years.
would be like an electrician making 137 million electrical connections in 1 square inch. That's beyond the capabilities of man.
It's why it's a slow formation over time. And men didn't. So
But not beyond the capabilities of God.
that's it, begging the question.
Psalm chapter 94 verse 9 says of God, "He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see?" Fact number 10. Belief in
Oh, and hey, Rusty Walker, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here, bud. Appreciate it.
God changes people's lives.
This is just a straight up emotional appeal. And you are correct. This guy is not too bright. So that's why, if you notice, I made a change to his shirt in the thumbnail. Yes, and Ilya Lates, yes, you are correct. He cherry picked the quote, "Darwin was steel manning his critics," which is, obviously, this is all problematic. But nonetheless, this 10th one, so this 9 down, this is the last one you see, 2 hours, 24 minutes. Just like, this is how difficult this was. I could not do a creative video off this and do it justice. I just needed to do it live. To do a creative video on this would have taken forever. So because I wanted to hit all these major points, and we would have been here for like an hour. That video would have gone on forever. So belief in God changed people's lives. This is just an emotional appeal.
Maybe one of the strongest proofs for the existence of God is the fact that belief in God has transformed countless lives throughout history.
And many would say for the worst. For the worst is that belief in God has led people to some really tragic ends and some really terrible, horrifying actions. So this is, like I said, this is just an appeal to emotion. Because someone can believe in a God and something positive can come from it is not a proof that God exists. That does not follow. That does not logically follow. And that human history teaches us that belief in these things often leads to terrible things. So, and McKinnon Mitchell brings up, Bruce Campbell transformed my life. Bruce Campbell is now God. Which ostensibly I think would be a better God than the Christian God.
Innumerable people have testified of how believing in God has helped them overcome destructive lifestyles and
by replacing one addiction with another. That's what that does, which is why I'm actually against religious foundational AA or Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. Secular versions of those are much better because they don't replace one addiction with another. They teach people coping mechanisms to deal with their addiction and to deal with their disease in constructive manners, but they don't simply replace one with the other.
Drug or alcohol addiction, how God has given them a purpose for living and hope for the future.
That's problematic because that just means that they weren't taught to derive one for themselves and they were just handed one. And that is like the ultimate, I think that is like the ultimate mental chains that you can put on somebody is basically saying, this is your purpose. This is what has been decreed to be. What you say or feel has no bearing on this. This is psychological manipulation at its finest. Donnie does that for 10 freedom dollars. His rotation of Earth is 23 hours, 56 minutes. 23 hours, 56 minutes, 4.09053 seconds, I'm assuming. And orbit takes 365.256 days. Leap years every 4, except years divisible by 400. Calendars are only necessary for agriculture. It's arbitrary. Thank you, Donnie does that, for the super chat. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And how God has helped them become more loving and kind. I can relate because God has drastically changed my life. I was a drug user and a drug
Isn't that apparent?
drug dealer and started reading the Bible in jail after getting arrested for drug and gun crime.
So you're telling me, Greg, and I think this is the worst, you're telling me, Greg, that at your most emotionally desperate, you and your most emotionally vulnerable, you glommed onto something that gave you hope. When you were at your weakest, and there was something else you could glom onto, and now you espouse nonsense and irrational thinking and irrational behavior all over the place. So McKenna Mitchell. I was a drug user. Dude, your eyes told that story before your mouth did. Yep, there it is. Sean Alexander, you're right. There it is. Jailhouse religion. Yep. Desperation. Action Squad says, was? What? Was it though?
While incarcerated, I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior.
Probably he's part of a plea deal. He's a born-again Christian. It really helps with that. Really helps with paroles. Jack Burton says, another Christian who smoked, drank, and snorted himself into a hole so deep that only Jesus could pull him out of, right? Indicated that he didn't really have support structures or friends that could have helped him out of that.
And never went back to my old life of sin.
Well, sin implies the existence of a God. You haven't demonstrated that a God exists. All of your points were logically fallacious, and they've all been debunked. So, no, you're wrong.
And I give all the credit.
Because now, technically, what he's essentially doing, and the big issue on this is that he says that that God came into his life and made his life for the better. And so now he doesn't do drugs anymore. Now he sits on YouTube and he espouses bad science, irrational beliefs, and logically fallacious reasoning. So now he's espousing that people commit the worst in human reasoning in order to believe what he believes and that their lives will be better for this. He's essentially, God stopped him from doing harm to himself, came into his life, and now he does harm to everything, and now he does harm to society by espousing these things. So God technically made it worse if you look at like the outcomes. So McKenna Mitchell, your hairline is a sin. It's pretty rough. I would not be spiking my hair with that hairline.
Credit to God and his word, the Bible. God changes you. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse
Typically, usually for the worse, because it makes you judgmental and justifies societal divide.
17 says, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. God is real. There are numerous facts that attest to his existence.
So these weren't facts. Big brain. Look, check out the big brain on Brad. These are not facts, as we've demonstrated. That these are not demonstrative. That these are not facts. These are all logically fallacious conclusions. Appeals to emotion, arguments from incredulity, arguments from ignorance. It's just all bad. There were so many that I couldn't keep up with them. So many non sequiturs, so much begging the question, so many appeals to arguments from unpause for fuck's sake.
Including Bible prophecy,
Nope.
the law and order of the universe,
Nope.
the complexity of life, the weekly
Nope.
cycle,
Nope.
and changed lives of people who have come to know God. The evidence for God's existence is so abundant.
And it's not. And because it's pretty much almost over, he just goes on to kind of like reiterate his crap. So if anybody wants to grab that, because he looks stoned as fuck in that picture, screen grab that bad boy. Sorry, McKinnon. It just says unpause for fuck's sake. Action Squad says maybe he's a malfunctioning Terminator like a T-400. Skynet hadn't hammered out all the bugs yet, or will have, or is going to. Fucking time travel. So yeah, but yeah, this video was just the way it came out was going to be impossible to try and do just a created content on, and I'm glad to be done with it because I really wanted to address it, and I was like I had to go after this, but fuck, this dude is just bad. It's just so bad. But yeah, so. But yeah, I wanted to share that. There were some funny clips that I wanted to put in there. I was gonna make it funny, but it's just too much. Man, that was crazy. McKinnon says, Sean Alexander, you're fucking grounded. You are grounded, sir. Oh, so yeah, that was pretty much it. I wanted to do that kind of live debunk of this particular video. It was bad. And I wanted you guys to see that this is the kind of stuff that is out there. This kind of reasoning that is out there. That dude has over 500,000 subscribers. That's a big-ass audience that he is espousing his nonsense to. Not to mention all the other stuff, the anti-LGBTQ stuff, all the Illuminati stuff, New World Order crap. You know, it's all bad. It's just like alt-right, fundamentalist, conspiratorial nonsense. Sean Alexander for 20 Freedom Dollars. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It says, just remember, Trump didn't stage an insurrection. He just had a momentary lapse of treason. Oh man, I'm telling you, the stuff coming out in the stuff coming out in the whole the hearings right now, in the January 6th hearings, is hilarious. Is absolutely hilarious. It's so bad. It's so bad. Thank you, Sean Alexander, for the super chat. I really do appreciate that. Your support means everything. Thank you very, very much. McKinnon Mitchell says, over 500,000 subscribers. You don't even have to try on YouTube. God, that shit frustrates me personally. It absolutely does. You know, I'm not going to sit here and bitch that I don't have 500,000 subscribers. I haven't been going as long as he has. He's been on YouTube since 2014. Technically, I created this channel in 2011, but I wasn't putting anything on it. I had a couple of videos up, but, you know, it was a long time ago. And then my YouTube channel just sat there. And then in 2019, I really started creating stuff. So like 8 years, I didn't do shit. And so now I create stuff as often as I can. Now I have a working channel. So, and I'm currently, I haven't hit 2,000 yet. Slowly but surely, I hope I will eventually. McKinnon says, I'm not going to bitch that I don't have 500,000 subscribers. I am. Well, I can't bitch now because I haven't been working that long. So hopefully eventually one day I will have that many. You know, I'll work towards it, and I'll work towards earning every single one of them. But yeah, it is frustrating when you see that kind of nonsense taking such a hold on people, and the stuff that we do, that you do, McKinnon, that I do, that the Plot Hole does, that PhD Tony does, that it is a crime that individuals like Clive Wells, like PhD Tony, like the Plot Hole, like Team Skeptic, that they don't have 500,000, 1 million subscribers. You know, congrats to Simon and Dan, who is like getting up there. But yeah, it takes time, and it takes growth, and hopefully, and I want to earn every single one of my subs, and I want to earn them honestly. So thank you, John Fapiano, for the says nice stream. That guy is creepy as fuck. He is pretty creepy. He's pretty creepy. Boomer says sell your soul to Reddit. Ugh, Reddit. at least Reddit is not as bad as Twitter. But yeah. But I'll tell you what, the Discord stages are really, really helping. They really are. H. Jasper says, you don't want those 500,000 delusions around. Sean Alexander says, McKinnon just realized I'm subbed to your channel. I saw the first Hovind video, and I'm going to start another soon. Excellent work. McKinnon Mitchell does amazing work. His Hovind documentary is some of the most outstanding shit I've ever seen. If I had just come across that on like Amazon Prime, I would have bought that shit outright. I want that. That is in my digital collection. It was one of the best documentaries I've ever seen on a religious figure. It exposed everything that you need to know about him. I commented on it. It's the final nail in the Ken Hovind coffin. Watch that. You should, and it's justification to never follow that man again. And hopefully, when I reported him to the IRS for violating the terms of his 501c3 by platforming a politician on his channel, hopefully something comes about that, because the IRS doesn't play around with that. Hopefully, you know, that will go somewhere. I don't know if it will, and they're not going to get, they already tell you on the website when you're filling out that form that they're not going to give you updates on it. Technically, you could get a reward for doing it, but I don't know if anything's going to come of that. But nonetheless, I reported that, and hopefully that will help along those ways. Jack Burton says, don't despair of the disparity in views. McDonald's is more popular than Ruth's Chris. This is true. Jay Verse says, I only recently subscribed because I just found your channel name recently from an Irish Demon video. Kept looking for J.L. Warren. I appreciate that. Yeah, for the longest time, the channel was just J.L. Warren, and then I decided to brand and create Bridge the Divide, and try to be a bit more professional with this and actually try to put something out there. So, and the URL for the channel is still youtube.com/JLWarren, which I don't know if I can change, but it is Bridge the Divide now. So I appreciate you being here, Jay Verse. It's awesome to have you hang out with us, and I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. I really, really do. Oh, man. Whew. So that was a rough one. And I'm glad that we got through it. Just cringe. Some of it was just absolute cringe. And I can finally close these notes, and I do not have to address this again. I don't have to do a content. I don't have to listen. I listened to that for so many hours. I just wanted to punch myself in the face. It was like that anybody could just be... It's not just that somebody could be that ignorant. It's that someone could think that others are that ignorant. You know, it's just... It kills me. It absolutely kills me. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, thank you very much for hanging out. This has been an absolute blast. Thank you to all of the super chats. They help to make this channel what it is. They help me to continue doing this kind of work, and I love hanging out with y'all, and it really, really makes it. Thank you so much to McKinnon Mitchell for hanging out. Freaking YouTube legend there. And I'm making this prediction. Future YouTube legend. That is I'm prophesizing. I'm prophesizing that McKinnon Mitchell will be a future YouTube legend. He's already a legend in my mind. So, but he will get there. Same with Jefferson Spatchcock. Everybody else who creates content out there, you all are amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you to the super chats. Thank you to all of the channel members, all of the members of the Godless Army. I appreciate you being here. If you would also like to be a member of the Godless Army, you can. It's 99 cents a month. That price will never go up because that's about as much as I value my content. And of course, you know, I got to be able to do this somehow, and I want to make it as financially feasible for everybody. So for 99 cents a month, you get access to all of the very cool custom emojis I make for you. All the ones that you saw when Otangelo was in here, the crying Otangelo and Darth with red duct tape on his mouth, and you know, all the philosophers and the David Hume, Aristotle, and then of course, you know, Donut Earth and Kent Hovind in jail, and then of course my current favorite, Heil Greg. The Heil Greg emoji. I'm very, very proud of that. There are more emojis on the way. More emojis on the way. I can't talk as we unlock more, as more channel members come on board. So check that out. The link is in the description, and I appreciate each and every single one of you. Thank you all so very, very, very much. I could not do this without your support. Thank you, Sean Alexander, for showing all of the very cool... Yeah, Met Koala as well. There's Met Koala. And Dr. Peel. I got a Dr. Peel one in there. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I appreciate everybody hanging out. This has been an awesome stream. Johnny sent me a link over to his stream. I don't know if he's still going, but I'm going to check that out here in a second because I've got to get something to eat. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your night. I may see a bunch of you over there. Rhoda No Less Name says, "Oh crap, I'm late. A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." So I appreciate everybody coming out. This has been an absolute blast. And as always, and I got thank you HS3E for I think that's pounds or euros. No, euros. 2 euros? I think so. I think that's 2 euros. Thank you very much for the super chat. I do appreciate that. That's over at the plot hole, McKinnon Mitchell. So Johnny that's literally the plot hole over at that channel. If someone could drop a link for that, that'd be fantastic because I'm in the StreamYard at the moment. And I'm basically stalling because I don't have the outro vid ready. So, a George Carlin emoji. That would be fantastic. A good George Carlin one. I've gotten lots of recommendations for for different emojis, and they're all going to be there. We just got to get the channel members in to unlock them. So, thank you all again very much. And as always, be safe, be excellent to each other, and together we can bridge the divide. Hey, Cindy Johnson, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Didn't want to miss you.